The city of San Vesper sprawled below, a glittering circuit board of light and ambition, but Isael Chosen saw none of its beauty. From his vantage point in the penthouse office of the Chosen Dynamics Tower, a structure of obsidian glass and cold steel that pierced the heavens like a monument to his own will, the metropolis was merely a data stream. Tonight, that data was corrupted. On the trio of holographic displays that hovered above his minimalist desk, the numbers bled red. CHSN, minus 17.8%. Volume, astronomical. The market was in a state of managed panic, a frantic sell-off orchestrated with the precision of a military strike. Every dip, every surge of negative press, every whisper in the digital corridors of finance was too perfect, too timely. This wasn't the chaotic churn of market fear. This was a targeted assassination. At 34, Isael had built an empire on logic, on predicting patterns and exploiting inefficiencies. His company, Chosen Dynamics, wasn't just another tech giant. It was the architect of the future. Its flagship project, codenamed Prometheus, was a true artificial intelligence, a learning system so advanced it promised to redefine everything from global logistics to medical science. It was his life's work, his legacy. And Julian Thorne was trying to rip it from his hands. The name tasted like ash in his mouth. Julian Thorne, the vulture of Silicon Valley. A man who didn't build, but consumed. A corporate raider who treated innovation as a carcass to be stripped bare. For years, their rivalry had been a cold war fought in boardrooms and on stock exchanges. But this was different. This was a declaration of total war. Isael's fingers, long and elegant, traced the edge of his desk, a slab of polished meteorite that had cost more than most people's homes. The surface was cool and unyielding, just like the world he had created for himself. Control was everything. It was the only armor that had ever proven reliable. Yet, for the first time in a decade, he felt the cold chill of its failure. Thorne wasn't just attacking his company, he was inside it. The attacks were too surgical. A minor security flaw in their cloud infrastructure, known only to a handful of senior engineers, had been exploited to leak a doctored, unflattering internal memo. A key supply chain partner had suddenly defaulted on their contract, citing a clause so obscure that only the original legal team would remember its inclusion. Whispers of Isael's erratic leadership were surfacing on private investor forums, using language that mirrored phrasing from his sealed psychological evaluation, a document required for a high-level government contract 2 years ago. This wasn't a frontal assault. It was sabotage, death by 1,000 cuts, executed by someone with the highest level of access. A ghost in his machine. A soft chime announced the arrival of his chief legal counsel. The frosted glass door to his office slid open with a whisper-quiet hiss. Marcus Vance entered, his expression as grim as the stock tickers. Marcus was the antithesis of Isael in almost every way. Where Isael was tall, sharp, and clad in a bespoke suit that seemed forged rather than tailored, Marcus was shorter, softer around the edges, his off-the-rack suit perpetually rumpled. But his mind was a fortress of legal precedent and unwavering loyalty. He was the only person Isael trusted without reservation. "The board is sharpening their knives," Marcus said, forgoing any pleasantries. He placed a sleek data slate on Isael's desk. "They're calling for an emergency session. They want answers, Isael. They want a head on a platter. Preferably not yours, but they're getting desperate." Isael didn't look at the slate. He didn't need to. He could feel the board's collective fear radiating through the building's very foundations. Let them sharpen. Fear makes men predictable. "Predictably stupid," Marcus countered, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "They're talking about bringing in an outside consultant to stabilize the company. We both know that's code for wresting control from you until the storm passes." Thorne would love that. It would be like inviting the fox to guard the henhouse. Isael finally turned from the window, his gray eyes, the color of a winter storm, fixing on Marcus. "He's not just outside the henhouse, Marcus. He's already inside. He has someone on the inside. Someone with access to everything." Marcus nodded slowly. "My thought as well. The security sweeps have found nothing. We've run diagnostics on every employee with executive-level clearance. Polygraphs, digital forensics on their personal devices, nothing. Whoever it is, they're a professional. A ghost, as you said." Isael began to pace, his movements economical and precise, like a caged panther. The office, designed to be a sanctuary of control, suddenly felt like a prison. "We're looking in the wrong way. We're running external checks, trying to look in from the outside. We need someone to look from the inside out. Someone who can move through the system without raising a single flag, who can watch the watchers, listen to the listeners. Another security sweep won't work, Marcus insisted. Even if we hire the best firm in the world, their presence would be noted. The mole would just go dormant until they leave. We need a permanent, invisible presence. Exactly. Isael stopped, his back to the city. The reflection in the glass showed a man perfectly composed, but his mind was a maelstrom. We need an asset. Someone who belongs here, whose access is absolute and unquestioned, but whose real purpose is known only to us. A heavy silence settled in the room, broken only by the faint, almost subliminal hum of the building's climate control. Marcus looked down at his shoes, then back up at Isael, a strange, hesitant light in his eyes. It was the look of a man about to suggest something utterly insane. There is a way, Marcus began, his voice low. A strategy that is so audacious, so unorthodox, that no one would ever see it coming. Isael raised a skeptical eyebrow. I'm listening. What is the one position in your life that grants unlimited, unquestioned access to everything? Your home, your schedule, your private financials, your social circle, your presence at the most sensitive company events. Isael's face hardened. A flicker of a painful memory, a ghost of betrayal past, crossed his features before being ruthlessly suppressed. Don't be absurd, Marcus. I'm not. Think of it not as a personal relationship, but as a deep-cover infiltration protocol, Marcus pressed, shifting into the legal, logical language he knew Isael would respond to. A spouse. A wife. The word hung in the air like a toxin. Isael's jaw clenched so tightly a muscle jumped along his cheekbone. His divorce from Adrian a few years prior had been a quiet, surgically clean amputation, but it had left deep scars. It had taught him, in the most brutal way, the vulnerability that came with intimacy. Absolutely not, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low temperature. I will not make a mockery of that institution again, even for this. The last time I trusted someone with that level of access. He let the sentence hang, the unspoken conclusion a chasm between them. This wouldn't be about trust, Isael. It would be a contract, Marcus argued, his confidence growing as he laid out the logic. A business arrangement. We find a candidate with the requisite skills set, a world-class cybersecurity expert, a white-hat hacker, someone who can dance through firewalls like they're walking through an open door. We create a believable backstory for your whirlwind romance. We marry you, and then we let her loose. He took a breath, letting the sheer audacity of the plan sink in. No one would ever suspect. The new Mrs. Chosen, a beautiful woman on your arm at galas, would be perceived as a distraction, maybe even a weakness by Thorn. They'd underestimate her. They would never, in a million years, think that the socialite redecorating your penthouse is simultaneously mapping your entire corporate network for anomalies and tracking the mole's digital footprint. Isael stood motionless, his mind processing the strategy. The cold, ruthless calculus of it appealed to the part of him that saw the world as a chessboard. It was a queen's sacrifice gambit. High risk, high reward. It was elegant in its deception. But the personal cost felt astronomical. To feign intimacy, to perform a relationship, it was a violation of his carefully constructed solitude. And where would you propose to find this, Paragon? Isael asked, his tone laced with acid sarcasm. An elite hacker who is also willing to sign her life away to play the part of a billionaire's wife, who can be trusted not to have her own agenda? That's the difficult part, Marcus admitted. She would have to be an outsider, with no ties to our world. Untraceable. A ghost in her own right. Someone motivated by something other than money, perhaps. Someone with the skills we need and a reason to take such a monumental risk. Isael walked back to his desk and stared at the bleeding numbers on the displays. He saw the culmination of his life's work, Project Prometheus, being circled by Thorn's vultures. He saw the faces of the 12,000 employees whose livelihoods depended on him. He saw the legacy his father had entrusted to him, crumbling under the weight of an invisible betrayal. Control. It always came back to control. Thorn had taken it from him. This plan, as insane and personally repugnant as it was a way to take it back. It was a move so unexpected, so deeply personal, that Thorn would never predict it. He finally looked at Marcus, his gray eyes void of all emotion. The decision had been made. The man had been subsumed by the CEO. Find her, Isael commanded, his voice as cold and hard as the meteorite beneath his fingertips. I want a full dossier. Financials, psychological profile, skill assessment, potential leverage points. I don't want a partner, Marcus. I want an asset. A weapon in a wedding dress. Find me a ghost I can marry. Marcus gave a single, slow nod, understanding the weight of the order. The search had begun. In the shadows of the digital world, a summons was about to be sent, a proposition that would change two lives forever. Isael turned back to the window, watching the city below, no longer seeing a circuit board of lights, but a battlefield. And he had just commissioned his most unconventional weapon. While Isael Chosen commanded a kingdom of sterile glass and calculated silence, Kaylee Iden ruled a different kind of empire. Her domain was a cramped second-bedroom command center in a pre-war apartment building in San Vesper's decidedly less glamorous district of Oak Haven. The air here wasn't filtered and chilled but thick with the scent of ozone from overworked electronics, old books, and the constant, faint aroma of soldering flux. Rain lashed against the window pane, the rhythmic drumming a familiar soundtrack to her nocturnal existence. Here, she was not Kaylee Iden, the quiet, almost invisible IT support specialist who spent her days fixing printer jams and resetting passwords at a mid-tier accounting firm. Here, bathed in the cool, multi-hued glow of 4 monitors, she was Cassandra. Her fingers, adorned not with manicured polish but with the faint calluses of a lifelong keyboardist, danced across the custom-built ergonomic keyboard. They moved with a fluid, preternatural speed, a blur of motion that translated into streams of cascading code on her central display. She was a wraith in the machine, a whisper in the dark web, a legend spoken of in hushed tones on encrypted forums. Cassandra could crack anything, find anyone, and disappear without a trace. She was a ghost by choice. Tonight, her focus was a complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts, a tangled knot of financial deceit spun by a human trafficking ring operating out of Eastern Europe. It was pro bono work, a way to sharpen her skills and, in some small way, balance the scales of a world she knew to be fundamentally unjust. The code of their encrypted servers unfolded before her like digital origami. She saw the patterns, the tells, the tiny imperfections left by a sloppy programmer. She found the master key, slipped past the firewalls, and began downloading everything: names, locations, bank transfers. She packaged the data, encrypted it with her own unbreakable signature, and sent it anonymously to an Interpol contact she'd cultivated years ago. Another web, dismantled. Justice, of a sort, delivered from a rainy room in Oak Haven. She leaned back in her worn leather chair, the springs groaning in protest, and ran a hand through her messy blonde hair, which was currently tied up in a haphazard knot. A pang of exhaustion hit her, but it was overshadowed by the familiar, low-grade hum of satisfaction. This was control, not the kind Isael Chosen wielded with wealth and power, but a more fundamental kind. The power to expose truth, to untangle lies. It was a skill born of tragedy, forged in the crucible of loss. As she was about to power down her secondary systems, a news alert flashed in the corner of her right-hand monitor. It was a feed she had programmed years ago, an algorithm that scanned global financial news for one specific name. Headline: Thorne makes bold play for Chosen Dynamics. Stocks plummet. The name hit her with the force of a physical blow, a jolt of ice water through her veins. Julian Thorne. The hum of satisfaction vanished, replaced by a cold, familiar rage that had been her constant companion for over a decade. She clicked the link, her heart hammering against her ribs. The article detailed Thorne's hostile takeover bid, complete with a smug, predatory photo of the man himself. He hadn't changed. The same perfectly coiffed silver hair, the same expensive suit, the same smile that didn't reach his cold, reptilian eyes. The same smile he'd worn the day he destroyed her father. Her gaze drifted to a small, framed photograph on her desk, nestled between a soldering iron and a stack of technical manuals. It was the only personal item in the room. A man with kind eyes and a brilliant, easy smile, his arm wrapped around a grinning, pigtailed 10-year-old girl. Her father, Dr. Isael. The memories came unbidden, as sharp and painful as the day they were made. Isael had been a genius, a software architect whose mind saw the world in elegant, logical systems. He wasn't a businessman. He was an artist whose medium was code. He had been developing a revolutionary data compression algorithm, something. The location for their first meeting was a testament to Isael Chosen's obsession with control. It was not his office, a space too infused with his personal power, Nor was it a public restaurant, a venue too rife with variables. Instead, Marcus's encrypted instructions led Kaylee to the Airy, a private, unlisted conference suite on the 72nd floor of the Hyperion Hotel, a property owned by a Chosen Dynamics subsidiary. It was neutral ground of his own choosing, a clinical, sterile environment designed for high-stakes transactions, far removed from the messy realities of human interaction. Kaylee stepped out of the private elevator into a minimalist foyer of gray marble and brushed steel. The rain had stopped, and the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, washing the city in a sharp, crystalline light. The view through the floor-to-ceiling windows was breathtaking, a god's-eye perspective of the metropolis she knew from its gritty underbelly. Down there, she was a ghost. Up here, she was about to become a carefully constructed illusion. She had dressed for the part with meticulous care, not as a socialite, but as a professional entering a negotiation. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored sheath dress in a deep charcoal gray, its clean lines conveying competence rather than opulence. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a sleek, low ponytail. Her makeup was minimal, her only accessory a simple, modern silver watch. It was a calculated uniform of understated confidence. She was not here to be dazzled. She was here to sign a contract. Marcus Vance was waiting for her, his usual rumpled suit looking even more out of place amidst the stark luxury. His smile was nervous, a stark contrast to the placid expression of the two silent, broad-shouldered men in dark suits flanking the far door. Security. Isael security. Ms. Iden, Marcus greeted, extending a hand. His palm was slightly damp. Thank you for coming. He's waiting for you. Kaylee shook his hand, her grip firm and dry. Mr. Vance. Her eyes flickered to the security detail. A bit theatrical, don't you think? Marcus gave a wan smile. Precaution. It's his way. He led her to the conference room door. It opened not with a turn of a handle but with a faint electronic click as Marcus pressed his thumb to a nearly invisible panel. The room beyond was cavernous, dominated by a single, massive table of polished mahogany that seemed to float in the center of the space. 3 of the 4 walls were glass, offering a 270-degree panorama of Sandvesper. And at the far end of the table, silhouetted against the sky, stood Isael Chosen. He was taller than his photos suggested and possessed a stillness that was unnerving. It wasn't a passive stillness, but the coiled, predatory calm of an apex predator conserving energy. He wore a dark, custom-tailored suit that fit his lean, athletic frame with a precision that bordered on inhuman. As she approached, he turned, and for the first time, she met his gaze directly. His eyes were exactly as she had imagined, the color of polished granite, intelligent and utterly devoid of warmth. They assessed her in a single, sweeping glance, taking in every detail of her appearance with an unnerving, analytical focus. It was the look of a man cataloging an asset, not meeting a person. Cassandra, he said. His voice was a low, resonant baritone, smooth on the surface but with an undercurrent of steel. Using her hacker alias was a deliberate power play, a reminder of the true nature of their meeting. He was hiring the skill, not the woman. Kaylee stopped a few feet from the table, refusing to be drawn immediately into his orbit. My name is Kaylee Iden, she stated, her own voice cool and even. She would not be reduced to a function. This was her first move in their silent chess match. You'll use it. A flicker of something surprise? Grudging respect passed through his stone-gray eyes before being extinguished. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Ms. Iden, please, sit. He gestured to the chair opposite him. Marcus, looking relieved that the initial confrontation hadn't escalated, scurried to pull it out for her. Kaylee ignored the gesture and seated herself, placing her portfolio on the gleaming table. She met Isael's gaze across the vast expanse of polished wood. The silence stretched, a palpable thing, as they took each other's measure. He was waiting for her to speak first, to show deference. She refused to give it. Finally, Isael spoke again, breaking the standoff. Mr. Vance has briefed you on the general parameters of the situation. It wasn't a question. My company is under attack from an internal source. I need that source identified and neutralized. Your reputation, in certain circles, suggests you possess the unique qualifications for such a task. My reputation also suggests that I don't typically engage in corporate espionage, Kaylee countered smoothly, or enter into unconventional employment contracts. This is an unconventional problem, he retorted, his voice flat. It requires an unconventional solution. Your motivation is your own affair. The dossier Mr. Vance compiled on you was illuminating. Your personal history with Julian Thorne is a powerful motivator. I'm merely providing you with the arena and the resources to act on it. This is a symbiotic arrangement. Symbiotic, Kaylee repeated, letting the clinical term hang in the air. An interesting word for it. She leaned forward slightly. Let's be clear, Mr. Chosen. You're not just providing an arena. You're asking me to embed myself in your life, to become your wife. That goes far beyond a standard retainer. The role is a necessary component of the cover, he said, dismissing her point with a wave of his hand. Your access must be absolute and unquestioned. As my wife, your presence anywhere, my home, my office, at my side during a board meeting, will be logical. Any other role would be subject to scrutiny. The mole we're hunting is sophisticated. They would spot a conventional security consultant in a heartbeat. Marcus chose that moment to slide a thick, leather-bound document across the table. It landed in front of Kaylee with a soft, final thud. The sheer weight of it was intimidating. The contract, Marcus said unnecessarily. Kaylee opened it. The pages were dense with legalese, a labyrinth of clauses and subclauses. She began to read, her eyes scanning the text with the same speed and precision she used to read code. She wasn't an attorney, but she understood the language of systems, and this was a system designed to bind her completely. She paused at Section 4, Public Persona and Conduct. All public appearances, interviews, and social media activity to be managed and pre-approved by the Chosen Dynamics Public Relations Department, she read aloud. My wardrobe, my schedule, even my choice of restaurant for a casual lunch will be dictated by your team. She looked up at Isael. You're not asking for a wife, Mr. Chosen. You're commissioning a puppet. I am ensuring the integrity of the operation, he corrected, his expression unyielding. Consistency is key. Any deviation from the established narrative creates a vulnerability. Thorne and his people will be watching you under a microscope from the moment our relationship becomes public. There is no room for error. She flipped the page to Section 7, Confidentiality and Loyalty. Her eyebrows shot up. The penalties were draconian. Total forfeiture of compensation, plus a liquidated damages clause for $50 million for any breach, however minor. The infidelity clause was particularly brutal. It wasn't about emotional betrayal. It was a cold, hard assessment of risk. A romantic entanglement outside the marriage would be a security breach of the highest order. This, she realized, was personal. This was the scar tissue from his previous marriage to Adrian. He wasn't just protecting his company. He was armoring his heart, using legal language as a shield. $50 million, she murmured, tapping the clause with her finger. You place a high price on loyalty. I place a high price on betrayal, he countered, his voice taking on a harder edge. It's a lesson I've learned to my cost. This clause is non-negotiable. Kaylee continued to read, her mind working furiously. The contract was a cage, exquisitely designed and gilded with a compensation package that could buy a small country. But a cage was still a cage. She reached the end and closed the binder softly. It's a comprehensive document, she said, her tone neutral. But it's missing something. Isael's eyes narrowed. I assure you, Ms. Iden, my legal team is second to none. Nothing has been overlooked. You've overlooked my terms, Kaylee said calmly. A heavy silence descended on the room. Marcus looked as though he might faint. Isael leaned back in his chair, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his features. He had expected her to negotiate the compensation, perhaps quibble over minor lifestyle restrictions. He had not expected a counterproposal. You are in no position to dictate terms, Isael said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low octave. On the contrary, Kaylee replied, her confidence unwavering. She was on familiar ground now. This was a negotiation, a hack of a different kind. The system was Isael's ego and his desperation. You need me. Or, more specifically, you need Cassandra. You need a ghost. A ghost cannot operate effectively if its every move is tethered to a committee of PR handlers and security men who don't understand the environment she's moving through. Your system is designed for control. My work requires fluidity, instinct, and the ability to act on a millisecond of opportunity. Your contract, as written, puts me in a straitjacket. She leaned forward, her gaze locking with his. I am not interested in your money, Mr. Chosen. The compensation is irrelevant to me. My payment will be Julian Thorne's downfall. So, here are my terms. 1. You will remove the clauses regarding PR oversight of my daily life. I understand the need for a consistent public narrative, and I am more than capable of maintaining it. But I will not have my every move dictated. If I need to follow a lead that takes me to a place your PR team wouldn't approve of, I will do it. 2. The infidelity and loyalty clause remains, but it will be made mutual. If you compromise the operation, the same penalties apply to you. Isael's expression was thunderous. The idea of the clause applying to him was an affront, but it was her third term that truly shifted the power dynamic in the room. "In 3, she said, her voice dropping slightly. "You will grant me full, unrestricted, and unmonitored access to every server, every network, every piece of digital infrastructure within Chosen Dynamics. That includes your personal devices and Project Prometheus." Marcus made a choked sound. "Ms. Iden, that's impossible. Project Prometheus is the most secure asset we have. Only Mr. Chosen himself has that level of access. And his wife would, wouldn't she?" Kaylee countered, her eyes still locked on Isael. "Your entire premise is that my access must be absolute and unquestioned. I am simply asking you to make that premise a reality in the one area that truly matters. I cannot hunt a ghost if there are locked rooms in the house. Your mole is sophisticated. Their tracks will be faintest, almost non-existent. The only place they might have made a mistake, the one place they might have left a single, errant byte of data, is in the core of the system they are trying to steal. I need to be in the core." She paused, letting the logic sink in. "I need your master key. Anything less, and you're just hiring another security consultant who will fail, just like all the others. You're not paying for my time, Mr. Chosen. You're paying for my results. And these are the conditions required for those results." Isael stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting impulses. Everything in him, every instinct honed by years of absolute control, screamed to refuse. To give anyone, let alone this stranger, the keys to his kingdom, to Prometheus, was anathema. It was the ultimate vulnerability. And yet, he couldn't fault her logic. She was right. A conventional approach had failed. A tethered operative would fail. The mole was deep, and to catch them, the hunter had to go deeper. She wasn't asking for personal gain. She was asking for the tools to do the job he was hiring her for. She had turned his own logic, his own desperation, back on him. She had called his bluff. He thought of Thorne's smug face, of the red numbers on his screen, of the legacy he was about to lose. The risk of trusting her was immense, but the certainty of failure without her was absolute. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out and took the pen from the center of the table. He clicked it open. The sound was unnaturally loud in the silent room. He met Kaylee's unwavering gaze. "Marcus," he said, his voice flat. "Amend the contract." Marcus stared, dumbfounded. "Sir, all of it?" "All of it," Isael confirmed, his eyes never leaving Kaylee's. "Add a new addendum. Operational autonomy. Ms. Iden will have the access she requires. The mutuality clause stands. The PR oversight is struck. Draft it now." As Marcus, his hands trembling slightly, began to make the changes on his data slate, Isael slid the pen across the polished table towards Kaylee. It came to a stop directly in front of her. "The contract will be ready in 5 minutes, Ms. Iden," he said. "You have won your terms. But understand this. If you fail, or if you betray this arrangement in any way, the consequences outlined in Section 7 will seem like a pleasantry compared to what I will do. You wanted to hunt a monster. Welcome to the cage." Kaylee looked from his cold, granite eyes to the pen. She had done it. She had secured the means to her revenge. She had just been handed the keys to the kingdom and a direct path to Julian Thorne. She had made a deal with a man who was just as ruthless, just as dangerous as her enemy. She picked up the pen. It felt heavy in her hand, a small object signifying an irreversible choice. For a decade, she had been a ghost, a powerless observer avenging her father from the shadows. Now, she was stepping into the light, into the heart of the battle, armed with a contract and the resources of a king. She was not sure if she had just signed an employment agreement or a deal with the devil. And looking into the cold, unreadable depths of Isael Chosen's eyes, she had a chilling thought that perhaps the transition from Kaylee Iden, anonymous IT specialist, to Kaylee Chosen, the billionaire's enigmatic new wife, was executed with the same ruthless efficiency as a corporate merger. The public narrative was crafted and disseminated by Isael's PR team with surgical precision. It was a whirlwind romance, a chance meeting at a tech charity gala, an event Kaylee had digitally inserted her name into the guest list of, a shared passion for disruptive technology, and a swift, private ceremony for a couple who valued their privacy above all else. The story was just plausible enough to be believed, and just dramatic enough to satiate the voracious appetite of the city's gossip columns. Within 48 hours of signing the contract, Kaylee's modest apartment in Oakhaven was a memory. Her old life was packed away into a secure storage unit. a digital and physical ghosting of her past. Her new reality was the penthouse at the apex of the Chosen Dynamics Tower. The space was less a home than a monument to Isael's psyche. It was a vast, minimalist expanse of white marble, black leather, and polished chrome, punctuated by museum-quality modern art that was more about intellectual provocation than aesthetic pleasure. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a permanent, breathtaking view of the city, but they also created the unsettling feeling of living in a glass display case. There were no personal photographs, no clutter, no sign of the messy, chaotic business of living. It was a beautiful, sterile, and profoundly lonely place. Isael had been clinical in his orientation. "This is your suite," he had said, gesturing to a wing of the penthouse that was a mirror image of his own. "Your closet has been stocked. Your personal systems are linked to the household network. The security protocols will recognize your biometrics. You have full access." He had delivered the information with the detached air of a hotel concierge, then retreated to his own wing. They were husband and wife in name, but cohabiting strangers in practice, two celestial bodies orbiting a common, invisible center of gravity, their paths destined never to intersect. This, Kaylee knew, was by design. It suited them both. Her days were a performance. She was whisked by a silent driver to appointments with stylists, to lunches with the wives of board members, to charity committee meetings. She played her part flawlessly, projecting an aura of quiet intelligence and grace that the PR team had dubbed effortless sophistication. She learned to navigate the treacherous waters of high society, a world where conversations were layered with subtext and smiles were weapons. The women she met, draped in jewels and couture, saw her as an object of curiosity, a puzzle to be solved. They probed and prodded, trying to find the chinks in her armor, but Kaylee's training as Cassandra had prepared her well. She knew how to deflect, how to misdirect, how to listen more than she spoke. She was gathering data on a different kind of network now, a human one. But it was the nights that belonged to Cassandra. Once the penthouse fell into its customary, tomb-like silence, with Isael secluded in his study or away at a late meeting, Kaylee would retreat to her own command center. Her suite, while as sterile as the rest of the apartment, contained a study that she had been allowed to configure to her own specifications. The sleek, designer desk and chair remained, but they were now surrounded by her own custom-built rig, shipped from her old apartment under the guise of specialized personal electronics. Here, in the glow of her monitors, the ghost came alive. Her first task was to map the digital landscape of Chosen Dynamics. Armed with the master key Isael had reluctantly granted her, a cryptographic token that identified her to the system as Isael himself, she began her deep dive. It was like being handed a map to a hidden continent. She moved through the corporate network with the silence and speed of a phantom, her presence indistinguishable from Isael's own digital footprint. She started with the outer layers, the email servers, the internal communications platforms, the project management software. It was a mountain of data, a digital torrent of memos, reports, and casual chatter. Using a suite of custom-built analytical tools, she began to sift, searching not for keywords, but for patterns of behavior. Who accessed sensitive files after hours? Whose communication patterns changed subtly before and after a security leak? Who was too clean, too perfect, their digital trail suspiciously pristine? Days turned into a week. She barely slept, fueling herself with black coffee and a cold, burning sense of purpose. The human performance of being Kaylee Chosen was exhausting, but the nocturnal hunt as Cassandra was invigorating. She was in her element, a predator stalking its prey in a jungle of pure information. She found the first anomaly on the 8th night. It was buried deep within the access logs of the corporate legal server, a file repository containing every sensitive contract and pending litigation. According to the system, at 2:13 a.m. 3 weeks prior, the night before a damaging article about a failed acquisition was leaked to the press, a file containing the draft termination clause had been accessed by Isael's account. But Isael, according to his own digital calendar and security logs, had been on a flight to Tokyo at that exact moment, his devices powered down in compliance with airline regulations. It was a ghost, a perfect forgery of his digital credentials. Kaylee's fingers flew across the keyboard. This was the thread she had been searching for. A conventional security audit would have seen the log entry, noted it was from the CEO's account, and moved on. They wouldn't have cross-referenced it with his physical location. The mole was not just stealing data. They were masquerading as Isael himself, using his authority as the ultimate camouflage. She began to trace the ghost's path backward. It was a masterfully executed hack. The ghost hadn't breached the system from the outside. It had originated from within. It had used a zero-day exploit, a previously unknown vulnerability, in the building's high-level integrated network, the system that controlled everything from the elevators to the executive-level climate controls. The ghost had used this tiny crack to create a privileged user account, then used that account to clone Isael's credentials in real time, effectively creating a perfect digital doppelganger. After accessing the file, the ghost had scrubbed its own entry point, leaving only Isael's legitimate-looking footprint behind. It was elegant, audacious, and terrifyingly sophisticated. The mole wasn't just a disgruntled employee selling secrets. They were a hacker of a caliber close to her own. Her respect for her adversary grew, but so did her determination. She had found the how. Now she needed to find the who. She knew a direct confrontation with Isael would be pointless. He would want names, proof. All she had was a digital echo, a pattern. She needed more. She needed to get inside the core, inside Project Prometheus. The Prometheus servers were air-gapped, isolated from the main corporate network, accessible only from a handful of secure terminals within the R&D labs and Isael's own office. The mole, she reasoned, would have to have found a way to bridge that gap. The opportunity came during the annual Chosen Dynamics Foundation Gala, a lavish affair held at the city's most prestigious art museum. It was to be Kaylee's official debut into Isael's world, a night where every eye would be on them. She stood beside him in their penthouse suite as they prepared to leave. He was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking more like a sculpture than a man. She wore a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk, chosen by the PR team, that clung to her form. A cascade of diamonds, on loan from a jeweler, glittered at her throat. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. "Are you ready?" Isael asked, his voice neutral. He was adjusting his cufflinks, his attention seemingly elsewhere. "As I'll ever be," she replied, her voice calm despite the frantic calculations running through her mind. The gala was her window. While the entire senior executive team, including the mole, was at the museum, she would have a few precious hours to access the one place that was normally under constant surveillance, Isael's office. "Remember the protocols," he said, his gaze meeting hers in the mirror. "Stay by my side. Refer any substantive questions to me or Marcus. Do not engage with Julian Thorne if he appears. I understand the mission parameters, Mr. Chosen," she said, a hint of ice in her tone. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Tonight, you will call me Isael. It would be anomalous if you did not." The word hung in the air between them. Anomalous. It was the only language they shared. The gala was a dizzying kaleidoscope of wealth, power, and feigned sincerity. Kaylee moved through it with a practiced grace, a polite smile fixed on her face, her hand resting lightly on Isael's arm as he introduced her to a succession of industry titans and board members. She saw Julian Thorne across the room, holding court, his predatory smile making her stomach clench. She felt Isael tense beside her, a subtle stiffening of his posture that no one else would have noticed. At exactly 10:15 p.m., she executed her plan. Feigning a sudden headache, a classic, if cliché, maneuver, she excused herself. "I need some air," she murmured to Isael, her voice a convincing whisper of discomfort. The crowds. His gray eyes searched hers, a flicker of something, concern, suspicion, in their depths. "Do you want me to accompany you?" "No," she said quickly. "Please, don't make a scene. I'll just be in the ladies' lounge for a few minutes. Marcus can stay with me if it's a concern." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, a silent battle being waged behind his impassive facade. Then he gave a curt nod. "Very well. 10 minutes." It was all the time she needed. Marcus, ever the loyal watchdog, escorted her to a quiet corridor. "I'll be right outside," he said, his face etched with worry. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, giving him a weak smile. The moment she was out of his line of sight, she didn't turn towards the lounge. She moved swiftly in the opposite direction, toward a service exit she had identified on the museum's blueprints earlier that day. Her elegant evening shoes were silent on the polished floor. In her small, diamond-encrusted clutch was not a lipstick and a phone, but a miniaturized lockpick set and a custom-built dongle containing a suite of her most potent hacking tools. Outside, in the cool night air, she bypassed the alarm on a service door and slipped into a back alley. A sleek, black motorcycle, an untraceable electric model she had purchased with cash and stashed in a nearby garage, was waiting for her. In less than a minute, she had shed the silk gown to reveal the practical black catsuit she wore underneath, pulled on a helmet, and was speeding through the city's deserted downtown streets. The ride to the Chosen Dynamics Tower took 7 minutes. She used a service entrance in the sub-level parking garage, her counterfeit employee badge granting her access. The main elevators were shut down for the night, but the fire service elevator was still active. She rode it to the 75th floor, one below the penthouse offices. From there, it was a climb up a maintenance stairwell to the executive level. The hallway outside Isael's office was dark and silent, patrolled only by the silent, sweeping gazes of security cameras. Kaylee paused, her heart hammering. This was the most audacious part of her plan. She couldn't disable the cameras. That would leave a digital footprint. She had to become invisible to them. She took a deep breath and activated a program on her wrist-mounted device. It sent a pulse to the security hub, creating a microloop. For the next 5 minutes, the guards in the central security room would see a continuous, seamless recording of an empty hallway. She moved to Isael's office door. It was sealed by a biometric lock that required his fingerprint and a retinal scan. Impassable to anyone but him. But not to Cassandra. She pulled a thin, flexible film from her clutch. It was a gelatin-based print she had lifted from a glass he'd used in the penthouse. It had taken her 2 days to get a clean enough sample. She carefully placed it over the fingerprint scanner. The light blinked green. One down. The retinal scanner was the true challenge. But she had noticed that Isael often worked late, his face illuminated by his monitors. The high-resolution security cameras inside his own office, which he believed were for his protection, had been her eye in the sky. She had managed to capture a fractional, high-definition scan of his retina from a reflection on the screen of his data slate. It was an incomplete, corrupted file, but it was enough. Her custom algorithm went to work, rebuilding the missing data, creating a viable digital facsimile. She held her device up to the scanner. The beam of red light danced across its screen. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft, satisfying click, the door unlocked. She slipped inside, the door hissing shut behind her. The 5-minute loop was running out. She had to work fast. Isael's office was even more imposing in the dark, the city lights painting long, eerie shadows across the room. She ignored the view and went straight to his desk. His terminal was locked, protected by a password that was likely a complex, unguessable alphanumeric string. She didn't need to guess. She plugged her dongle into a port on the back of the machine. The screen flickered to life, bypassing the login screen entirely. She was in, and there it was, the icon for Project Prometheus. A simple, elegant P that represented the most valuable and dangerous piece of technology on the planet. She navigated to the server's core logs, her fingers a blur. She was searching for the bridge, the hidden connection between the main network and this digital fortress. And then she found it. It wasn't a piece of code. It wasn't a backdoor. It was hardware. A tiny, almost undetectable signal repeater, no bigger than a grain of rice, spliced into the fiber optic cable that fed the Prometheus terminal. It was a brilliant, elegant piece of physical sabotage. The device was passive, dormant, designed to activate only when it received a specific encrypted signal. It would then broadcast all data passing through the terminal to an external receiver. The mole didn't need to break into Prometheus. They were waiting for Isael to access it, and then they would simply listen in. Kaylee's blood ran cold. This changed everything. Thorne wasn't just trying to steal the code. He was trying to steal it live, during a demonstration, perhaps. She took a photo of the device's unique signature with her own device. This was the proof she needed. This was the ghost's fingerprint. Her time was up. She unplugged her dongle, and the screen went dark. She slipped out of the office, the door clicking shut behind her, just as the 5-minute camera loop expired. Her retreat was as clean as her entry. Back at the gala, She slipped back into the ladies' lounge, re-emerging a few moments later, the picture of composure. She found Isael exactly where she had left him, a storm of controlled fury in his eyes. "You were gone for 12 minutes, he said, his voice a low growl. The line was long. She replied sweetly, her heart still racing. He didn't believe her, she knew, but he couldn't prove anything. Later that night, back in the silent tension of the penthouse, she sat in her own study, staring at the photo of the repeater's signature. She ran a trace on the broadcast frequency it was programmed to use. The signal was routed through a series of proxies, but she peeled them back one by one, like the layers of an onion. The final destination made her stop cold. It wasn't a server farm in a remote country. It wasn't a hidden location belonging to Julian Thorne. The receiver was located in a high-end apartment building in the city's most exclusive district. An apartment registered under a holding company. A holding company that, after another hour of frantic digging, she traced back to its ultimate owner. Adrienne, Isael's ex-wife. The ghost in the machine wasn't just a corporate mole. It was a ghost of his past, come back to haunt him. And the betrayal ran deeper than he could ever have imagined. The discovery of Adrienne's involvement landed with the force of a silent, concussive blast. For Kaylee, sitting in the pre-dawn stillness of her command center, the city lights beginning to fade into the bruised purple of early morning, it was a paradigm shift. This wasn't just a corporate war anymore. The neat, logical lines of her revenge quest against Julian Thorne had just become tangled with the messy, unpredictable threads of Isael's personal history. The ghost in the machine had a face, and it was one that had once shared Isael's bed. Her first instinct, the Cassandra instinct, was to hold the information close, to analyze it, dissect it, and use it as a weapon at the most opportune moment. Knowledge was power, and this particular piece of knowledge was radioactive. Revealing it to Isael would be like lighting a match in a room filled with explosives. His reaction would be unpredictable, emotional, everything he prided himself on not being. But as she stared at the digital breadcrumb trail leading directly to his ex-wife, another, newer instinct surfaced. The instinct of a partner. She had seen the scar tissue on his psyche, the armor he had built around himself after his divorce. The draconian clauses in their contract were a testament to the depth of that wound. To withhold this information now, to manipulate him with it, would make her no better than the people they were fighting. Their alliance, as fragile and unconventional as it was built on a shared goal. It could not survive a one-sided secret of this magnitude. She made a decision. She would tell him, but not now. Not with a simple data file sent to his tablet. This was a conversation that had to be handled with the precision of defusing a bomb. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. That same morning, Julian Thorne, emboldened by his recent successes, escalated his attack. He didn't leak a document this time. He initiated a direct, hostile tender offer to the shareholders of Chosen Dynamics, a blatant attempt to buy the company out from under Isael. The offer was insultingly low, but it was designed to sow chaos and force the board's hand. It was a public declaration of war, splashed across every financial news outlet. Kaylee was in the penthouse's shared living space, a cavernous room she rarely entered, when Isael emerged from his wing. He was already dressed in a dark gray suit, a piece of urban armor, but for the first time, she saw a crack in his composure. There was a tightness around his eyes, a tension in his shoulders that even his perfect tailoring couldn't conceal. He was holding a data slate displaying the news, his knuckles white. "He's moved," Isael said, his voice flat, but she could hear the suppressed fury beneath the surface. "He's trying to trigger a panic sale." "It's a desperate move," Kaylee observed, her voice calm and steady, a deliberate counterpoint to the storm she knew was raging inside him. "It signals he believes he's close to his real objective. He wouldn't risk this much capital unless he was confident he could get his hands on Prometheus to justify the expense." Isael looked at her, his analytical gaze sharpening. He was used to dealing with the sycophantic platitudes of his board or the legal caution of Marcus. Her immediate, strategic analysis was something different. "You think he's preparing to make his move on the prototype itself?" "I think he already has," she said, taking the plunge. "And I know how. I need to show you something. In your office." The request hung in the air. His office was his sanctuary, the one place she had not been invited. Her presence there would be a crossing of a significant boundary. He studied her face, searching for any hint of deception. What he saw was a quiet, unshakable certainty. "Show me," he said, his voice clipped. They rode the private elevator down to the executive floor in a tense silence. The offices were already buzzing with a low-grade panic, but a single, sharp glance from Isael was enough to part the sea of anxious employees. They walked into his office, and the door hissed shut, sealing them in a bubble of quiet intensity. Kaylee didn't waste time. She walked directly to his terminal. Last night, while we were at the gala, I accessed your office. The confession was blunt, a calculated risk. She saw his body go rigid, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. You what? He asked, his voice a low, dangerous growl. I bypassed your security protocols, she continued, her back to him as she brought up the images on his main display. She knew it was safer to let the evidence speak for itself before he reacted. The biometric locks, the camera loops, your terminal password. I needed to examine the Prometheus access point directly. I suspected the breach was physical, not digital. I was right. On the screen, the high-resolution photo of the minuscule signal repeater appeared, spliced into the fiber optic cable. She followed it with the traceroute data, the complex web of proxies that she had unraveled, leading to the final destination. She highlighted the address, the holding company's name, and finally, the ultimate owner, Adrian Vancroft Chosen. His ex-wife's full legal name. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier, more profound than any silence she had ever experienced. Kaylee finally turned to face him. The change in him was terrifying. The cold, controlled CEO was gone. In his place was a man carved from ice, his face a mask of such profound, still fury that it seemed to suck all the air from the room. His gray eyes were not stormy now. They were flat, dead, like frozen lakes. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at her. Explain, he commanded. The single word was not a request. It was a threat. The ghost we've been hunting has a name, Kaylee said, her own voice remarkably steady. It's Adrian. She's been working with Thorn from the inside. This wasn't a recent development. The sophistication of the hardware, the way it was integrated into the system, this was planned years ago. Possibly even before your divorce. Isael remained motionless, absorbing the information. His mind, she knew, was processing the implications with lightning speed, recontextualizing years of his life, reevaluating every memory of his marriage. The betrayal wasn't just a simple affair, a footnote in his past. It was the foundation of the attack that was currently threatening to destroy his entire world. The hardware is passive, Kaylee continued, pressing her advantage, feeding his logical mind to keep his rage from boiling over. It only activates when it receives a specific signal. They aren't trying to pull the data from the server. They're waiting for you to push it. They're waiting for a demonstration, a diagnostic test, any event where the full code of Prometheus is active on this terminal. Then they flip the switch, and they capture everything, live. He finally moved, turning away from her to stare out the window at the city below. His hands were braced against the cold glass. The Global Tech Summit, he said, his voice rough. It's in 3 weeks. I'm scheduled to give the keynote. A private demonstration of Prometheus's capabilities to a select group of investors and government officials. That's their stage, Kaylee affirmed. They'll let you walk into the spotlight, and they'll get you in front of the entire world. Thorn gets the code, Adrian gets her revenge, and Chosen Dynamics becomes a footnote in a history book written by its enemies. He turned back from the window, and the icy rage had been replaced by something else, something far more dangerous, a cold, focused clarity. The wounded man had been locked away again. The strategist was back in control. She played me, he said, the words stated as a simple, undeniable fact. For years. The entire relationship. A long con. He looked at Kaylee, and for the first time, their alliance felt real, forged in the fire of this shared knowledge. You took an incredible risk coming in here last night, and a greater one by telling me this to my face. It was a calculated risk, she corrected him. I calculated that you valued results more than protocol. I calculated that you would recognize the truth when you saw it. And I calculated that we couldn't win this fight if we weren't operating with the same intelligence. A slow, humorless smile touched his lips. It was a chilling sight. Your calculations were correct. He walked to his desk and tapped a button on his intercom. Marcus, get in here. Now. When Marcus entered, he took one look at Isael's face and the data on the screen and seemed to shrink in on himself. Sir, Thorn's tender offer is now irrelevant, Isael stated. Cancel the emergency board meeting. Issue a press release stating that we are confident in our position and view Mr. Thorn's offer as an act of market manipulation. Then, cancel all my appointments for the rest of the week. We are going dark. He looked at Kaylee. The two of us are going to dissect every piece of data related to Project Phoenix and Adrienne's tenure at this company. We are going to find every string she ever pulled. He then looked back at Marcus. And you are going to get me a face-to-face meeting with Julian Thorne. Marcus blanched. A meeting? Sir, under the circumstances, that's highly inadvisable. He won't agree, and even if he did, he will agree, Isael interrupted, his voice dropping. Tell him I am prepared to discuss a settlement. A potential sale of a non-essential division. Tell him whatever you need to, but get me in a room with him. I want to look him in the eye. As Marcus scurried out to execute the impossible, Isael turned his full attention back to Kaylee. The professional distance between them had evaporated, burned away by the intensity of the situation. You said you wanted Thorne's downfall, he said. This is your chance. We know their plan. We know their endgame. Now, we write a new ending. For the next 72 hours, they barely left the office. Food was brought in, but rarely eaten. Sleep was a luxury they couldn't afford. They became a single, two-person unit, driven by coffee and a cold, shared fury. Kaylee's hacking skills and Isael's intimate knowledge of his own company and his ex-wife's psychology created a powerful synergy. They dove into the digital archives, pulling up years of Adrienne's corporate emails, her travel records, her financial statements. Kaylee, with her unrestricted access, unearthed encrypted files and hidden partitions that had survived previous security sweeps. They found it all. The secret meetings with Thorne, disguised as art auctions or spa retreats. The gradual siphoning of Isael's personal funds into offshore accounts that eventually funded the shell companies Thorne used. The chance meeting at the gala where they had first met, orchestrated by Adrienne, who knew Isael would be there. It was a masterpiece of long-term deception. Adrienne hadn't just been a spy. She had been the architect of his potential destruction. During a rare break in the early hours of the third day, as Kaylee worked to decrypt a particularly stubborn file, she felt Isael's eyes on her. She looked up from her screen. He was standing by the wet bar, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. Why? He asked, the question quiet, almost vulnerable. It wasn't about the corporate mechanics. It was personal. I gave her everything. Kaylee leaned back in her chair, momentarily stepping out of the role of Cassandra and into the role of something else. An observer. A partner. You gave her everything she asked for, she said softly. But maybe she wanted the one thing you couldn't give her, the thing you valued most. She didn't want to be the queen. She wanted to be the king. She wanted to see your name burn and her own rise from the ashes. He stared into his glass, the vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. She underestimated me, he said. And she underestimated you. He walked back to the desk, placing the glass down. The decryption? Almost there, she said, her fingers flying. It's a personal log. Encrypted with a key based on a sentimental date, it looks like. Her birthday is too obvious, Isael mused, his mind already back in the strategic game. Our wedding anniversary. She was never sentimental. The day she met Thorne? No, Kaylee said, a sudden insight striking her. The date your divorce was finalized. The day she was officially free. She typed it in. The file unlocked. It was Adrienne's journal. A chronicle of her contempt, her ambition, her partnership with Thorne. But it also contained their ultimate plan. They weren't just going to steal Prometheus at the summit. They had prepared a Trojan horse, a piece of malicious code hidden within the stolen data. When any company, including Thorne's own, tried to implement the stolen AI, the Trojan horse would activate, giving Adrienne ultimate control not just of Prometheus, but of any system it was integrated into. She wasn't Thorne's partner. She was playing him, too. She planned to let him take the fall for the theft, while she walked away with the ultimate prize. My God, Isael breathed, reading over her shoulder. She was going to burn everyone. At that moment, his personal comm line chimed. It was Marcus. The meeting is set, Marcus said, his voice strained. Thorne agreed. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. His territory. A private club he owns downtown. He said to come alone. Isael looked at Kaylee, a new, dangerous idea dawning in his eyes. A plan was forming, a calculated risk that would make everything they had done so far look like child's play. I won't be alone, Isael said, his gaze locked with hers. I'll be bringing my wife. The private club Julian Thorne owned was called the Sanctum. It was an old, converted bank in the heart of the financial district, its neoclassical facade a monument to old money and impenetrable secrets. The name was a perfect reflection of its owner's ego, a place for the chosen few, where the grubby rules of the outside world did not apply. To agree to meet here was an act of supreme arrogance on Thorne's part, a power play designed to put Isael on the defensive from the moment he arrived. It was Thorne's territory, his cage. He didn't know Isael was bringing a ghost with him. They arrived not in Isael's conspicuous, armored sedan, but in a nondescript town car that blended into the city's traffic. Kaylee was dressed in a deceptively simple, high-collared navy blue dress. It was elegant and conservative, the perfect attire for a supportive wife. But beneath the expensive fabric, her true tools were concealed. A tiny, broadcast-quality microphone was disguised as a pearl earring. A micro-camera, with a lens no bigger than a pinprick, was embedded in the setting of a demure brooch on her lapel. Her slim, elegant clutch contained a powerful signal booster and a solid-state recording device. She was a walking surveillance suite. Isael, seated beside her, was a study in controlled tension. He had shed the fury of the past few days, encasing himself once more in his armor of icy composure. But Kaylee, having now spent countless hours in his presence, could see the storm raging beneath the surface. It was in the unnaturally rigid set of his shoulders, the way his gaze was fixed on the city passing by, seeing nothing. "He will try to provoke you," she said softly, her voice a calm anchor in the silent car. "He'll probe for weakness. He'll use Adrienne's name. He wants you to lose control. He will be disappointed," Isael replied, his voice flat. He turned his head to look at her, his gray eyes meeting hers. The professional barrier between them had been irrevocably breached in the crucible of the last 3 days. Something new, something raw and undefined, had taken its place. "Your role is to be invisible. A concerned wife, out of her depth. Let him dismiss you. Let him underestimate you. Your observations will be more valuable than anything I say." "I understand," she said. "I'm your blind spot. The one variable he hasn't accounted for." He held her gaze for a moment longer. "Be careful, Kaylee," he said, the use of her first name in this context feeling both intimate and grave. "Thorne is a predator. Don't mistake his civility for weakness." The car pulled up to the curb. The heavy bronze doors of the sanctum swung open, manned by 2 imposing figures in dark suits. As they stepped out, Kaylee felt the weight of the city's gaze on them. This was a public execution, and they were walking willingly to the gallows. She slipped her hand into the crook of Isael's arm. The touch was part of the performance, but she felt the corded muscle tense beneath the fabric of his suit. It was real. The interior of the sanctum was all dark wood, worn leather, and hushed tones. The air smelled of old money, expensive whiskey, and masculine self-importance. A maitre d', with the funereal solemnity of an undertaker, led them through the main lounge, where heads turned and conversations paused as they passed. They were led to a private room at the back, a study sealed by a heavy, soundproof door. Julian Thorne was waiting for them, standing by a fireplace where a low fire crackled, despite the warmth of the day. He was exactly as Kaylee remembered from the day he had destroyed her father's life. Impeccably dressed, his silver hair gleaming, his smile a predatory slash in his handsome face. He held a glass of amber liquid, swirling it gently. "Isael," he greeted, his voice a smooth, cultured purr. "I confess, I was surprised when Marcus called. I thought you'd be too busy trying to patch the holes in your sinking ship." He let his gaze drift to Kaylee, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "And you brought your lovely new bride. A pleasure to finally meet you, my dear. I'm Julian Thorne." He extended a hand to her. Kaylee took it, her touch light and brief. She felt a phantom revulsion, a decade of hatred welling up inside her, but her expression remained one of polite, slightly intimidated deference. "Mrs. Chosen," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. She let her eyes widen slightly, playing the part of the overwhelmed newcomer perfectly. Thorne's smile widened. He had already dismissed her. "Good. My wife is here for support," Isael said, his voice cold. "She is not part of this discussion. Shall we dispense with the pleasantries, Julian? You know why I'm here. Humor me," Thorne said, gesturing for them to sit in 2 leather armchairs opposite him. He remained standing by the fire, a classic power posture. "I am curious. What could possibly have prompted the great Isael Chosen to seek a meeting with his nemesis on the very day I announced my intention to acquire his company? A sudden attack of pragmatism? Or has the pressure finally cracked that infamous composure?" Isael settled into the chair, his movements fluid and relaxed. He looked perfectly at ease, a man without a care in the world. It was a masterful performance. I'm a realist, Julian. Your Tinder offer, while crude, has put my board in a difficult position. They are weak, prone to panic. I am here to discuss a more civilized alternative. A solution that benefits us both and avoids a protracted, messy public battle. Thorne raised an eyebrow, intrigued. This was not the reaction he had expected. He had expected rage, threats, defiance. This calm pragmatism was disarming. I'm listening. Chosen Dynamics has several divisions. Isael began, launching into the pre-rehearsed script they had developed. Logistics, cybersecurity, consumer electronics. They are profitable, but they are not the core of my business. We both know what the core is. Prometheus, Thorne supplied, his eyes gleaming with avarice. Prometheus is not for sale, Isael stated flatly. But to appease my board and demonstrate a strategic restructuring, I am prepared to entertain an offer for the sale of our entire consumer electronics division. It's a clean acquisition, a significant asset for your portfolio. In exchange, you withdraw your hostile bid, and we both walk away with what we want. Kaylee watched Thorne, her senses on high alert. Her camera was capturing the micro-expressions on his face, her microphone recording the subtle inflections in his voice. He was considering it. The offer was a brilliant feint. It was plausible, logical, and it played directly to his ego. Acquiring a major division of his rival's company without a fight would be a huge victory, a public humiliation for Isael. That's a surprisingly reasonable offer, Thorne said slowly, pacing in front of the fireplace. He was trying to find the trap. Why now? Why come to me with this? You could have issued a statement, gone through official channels. Because I want to discuss another matter, Isael said, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. A matter of a shared asset. Adrian. The name dropped into the room like a stone into a silent pool. Kaylee saw Thorne's posture stiffen for a fraction of a second. A tiny, almost invisible muscle twitched in his jaw. The camera caught it all. He recovered quickly, his expression one of polite confusion. Adrian? Your ex-wife? I'm not sure I follow. What does she have to do with this? He asked, his voice a model of innocence. Don't insult my intelligence, Julian, Isael said, leaning forward. The pretense of civility was beginning to fray, just as they had planned. She came to you after our divorce, didn't she? A woman scorned, with a head full of my company's secrets. You saw an opportunity. You funded her, cultivated her, used her as your weapon against me. Thorne chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. Isael, you're becoming paranoid. It's a common symptom of extreme stress. Yes, I know Adrian. We move in the same social circles. She's a charming, intelligent woman. I can certainly see why you were captivated by her. But a conspiracy? That's the stuff of cheap novels. Kaylee held her breath. This was the critical moment. She had to give Isael the ammunition he needed. She subtly shifted in her chair, a movement of nervous discomfort that was part of her act. As she did, she pressed a small, hidden button on her clutch. In Isael's ear, a tiny, custom-molded earpiece, invisible under his hair, came to life. He's lying, she whispered, her voice transmitted directly to him. His heart rate increased by 12 beats per minute when you said her name. His vocal pitch rose by half a semitone. Classic physiological indicators of deception. Push him. Isael's eyes narrowed. He now had external confirmation of his gut instinct. He pressed the attack. Let's talk about a shell corporation, Isael said, his voice like chipping ice. Phoenix Global Investments. Registered in the Cayman Islands. Its primary holding is an apartment in the Sovereign Tower. An apartment currently leased by Adrian. An apartment that has been receiving untraceable, encrypted data bursts originating from my corporate network. Do you want to talk about the hardware she planted before she left me? Or should we move on to the payments you've been making into that account through a series of cutouts? He laid the information out piece by piece, a verbal dissection. He was using the information Kaylee had uncovered, weaving it into a narrative of undeniable fact. Thorne stopped pacing. The mask of amused condescension was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. He stared at Isael, his eyes hard and calculating. He had underestimated him. He had thought Isael was coming to him from a position of weakness. He was now realizing he was facing a man who knew far more than he should. You've been busy, Thorne said, his voice losing its purr. But you have no proof. Circumstantial evidence. Nothing that would stand up in court. Who said anything about court? Isael replied, a dangerous smile playing on his lips. He was enjoying this. This is a conversation between two businessmen. I'm not here to threaten you with lawyers, Julian. I'm here to renegotiate the terms of our relationship. You have a spy in my house. That is unacceptable. Thorne walked over to the bar and poured himself another drink. His hand was perfectly steady. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that your fascinating theory is correct. What is it you want? This was the moment of truth. Isael's next move would define the rest of the game. The summit, Isael said. The keynote. I'm canceling it. Kaylee's heart skipped a beat. This was a deviation from their plan. What was he doing? Thorne's eyes widened in genuine surprise. You're canceling? That's your big move? You're going to crawl into a hole and hide. That's not the Isael chosen I know. That Isael chosen is re-evaluating his priorities, Isael said calmly. The risk is too great. Without the demonstration of Prometheus, my stock will take another hit, of course. But the core asset remains secure. Your mole gets nothing. Your entire investment in Adrian becomes worthless. You'll have spent years and millions of dollars for nothing. And I will spend the next year methodically hunting down and destroying every one of your assets, starting with your suppliers and your creditors. I will bleed you dry, Julian. It will be slow, and it will be painful. It was a brilliant, unexpected gambit. He was threatening to burn down the entire chessboard. He was taking away Thorne's prize, leaving him with nothing but a costly failure. Thorne stared at him, his mind racing. He was trapped. If Isael canceled the demo, the entire enterprise was a bust. Years of planning, down the drain. He had to keep Isael on the path, keep him moving toward the stage. You won't do it, Thorne said, but there was a new note of uncertainty in his voice. Your ego won't let you. You'd never admit defeat so publicly. Try me, Isael said, his voice soft and deadly. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. He extended a hand to Kaylee. Come, my dear. I believe we're done here. Kaylee rose, her face a mask of wifely concern. Isael, perhaps we should consider Mr. Thorne's position. She began, playing her part. The discussion is over, Isael said, cutting her off curtly. Wait, Thorne said, his voice sharp. Isael paused at the door, his back to Thorne. Don't cancel, Thorne said. There's no need for such drastic measures. Perhaps we can come to a more mutually beneficial arrangement. Isael turned slowly. I'm no longer in the mood to negotiate. This isn't a negotiation, Thorne said, a desperate edge creeping into his voice. It's a proposition. Go ahead with your demonstration. Let the world see Prometheus. As a sign of good faith, I will publicly withdraw my tender offer tomorrow morning. I will issue a statement praising your leadership and the stability of Chosen Dynamics. Your stock will recover. Your board will be pacified. We go back to being civil rivals. It was exactly what they had wanted him to do. Isael had created a problem, and Thorne was now offering the solution. And Adrian? Isael asked. She will be dealt with, Thorne said dismissively. She has become a liability. Her access will be terminated. Consider her retired. He was cutting her loose, just as Adrian had planned to do to him. The vipers were turning on each other. Isael pretended to consider it. He looked at Kaylee, a silent, theatrical question in his eyes. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Very well, Isael said, as if reluctant. You withdraw the bid, and you muzzle your dog. And I proceed with the demonstration. But know this, Julian. If there is even a hint of duplicity, if anything goes wrong at that summit, the recording of this entire conversation, along with all the evidence I have, goes directly to the SEC and the FBI. Am I clear? Crystal, Thorne said, his confident smile returning. He believed he had won. He had maneuvered Isael back onto the path to the slaughterhouse. He had no idea that the recording was already streaming to a secure cloud server, and that the man he was facing was no longer his victim, but his executioner. As they walked out of the sanctum and back into the light of day, the performance fell away. The tension in Isael's arm eased. He took the bait, Kaylee said, her voice low and triumphant. Hook, line, and sinker, Isael replied. He opened the car door for her, a gesture of old-world courtesy that felt strangely intimate. As the car pulled away, Kaylee looked back at the imposing facade of the club. She had faced the man who had destroyed her family. She had looked into his eyes and helped to set the trap that would bring him down. The cold rage in her heart had been replaced by a clean, sharp sense of impending victory. Phase 1 is complete, Isael said, his voice resonating in the quiet car. He was looking at her, not at the city. His gray eyes were no longer cold, but held a new warmth, a fire of shared purpose and nascent respect. Now for Phase 2. Now we build the perfect trap. In that moment, sitting beside him, moving through the city that was their battlefield, Kaylee realized that the line between her quest for revenge and her alliance with Isael had completely disappeared. Their goals, their fates, and something more profound that she was not yet ready to name, were now inextricably intertwined. The ghost in the machine had a new mission, not just to haunt the guilty, but to architect their public damnation. And she would do it at the side of a man who was, she was beginning to realize, far more than just a client. The days leading up to the Global Tech Summit were a blur of intense, clandestine activity. The sprawling penthouse, once a symbol of cold isolation, transformed into a high-tech war room. The performance of their public lives continued, a charity dinner here, a brief, smiling photo opportunity there, but these were mere distractions from the real work, which took place in the dead of night. The shared living space, with its stark white couches and provocative art, became their strategic command center. Schematics and lines of code were projected onto the vast glass walls, the glittering city skyline serving as a surreal backdrop to their conspiracy. The dynamic between Isael and Kaylee had undergone a fundamental change. The formal, contractual boundaries had dissolved, eroded by shared secrets and a common enemy. They were no longer CEO and contractor, but two master strategists working in perfect sync. He brought his deep knowledge of the corporate and technological landscape, his understanding of his enemy's psyches. She brought her unparalleled ability to manipulate the digital world, to see the hidden pathways and vulnerabilities that no one else could. They worked for hours on end, often forgetting to eat or sleep, fueled by a potent cocktail of adrenaline and intellectual communion. He would pace the length of the room, outlining a strategic possibility, and she would counter or refine it from her position at a custom-built terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard, turning his theoretical concepts into actionable code. There was an intimacy in their collaboration that was more profound than any physical touch. It was a meeting of minds, a recognition of an equal in a world where both had always been alone at the top of their respective fields. Kaylee found herself seeing new facets of Isael. The IC CEO was still there, a formidable presence of will and intellect. But she also saw the brilliant inventor, his eyes lighting up with genuine passion as he explained the elegant neural architecture of Prometheus. She saw the weary warrior, the faint shadows under his eyes a testament to the years he had spent defending his creation. And, in rare, unguarded moments, she saw a flicker of the man he might have been before betrayal had taught him to armor his heart. One night, as she worked on the final stages of the digital trap they were setting, he came to stand behind her, watching the code cascade down the screen. "It's a work of art," he said quietly, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "The way you've woven the trap into the presentation's core programming. It's elegant. It's a reflection of its target," she replied without looking up from her work. Adrienne's own methods were elegant. The hardware splice, the forged credentials. She appreciated subtlety. It seems only fitting that her downfall should be subtle as well. The mention of Adrienne's name still had the power to cast a chill over the room. Isael fell silent. Kaylee finished the line of code she was writing and then turned in her chair to face him. He was staring out at the city, his expression distant and unreadable. "You never talk about her," Kaylee said softly. It wasn't an accusation, but a simple observation. He took a long moment to respond. "There was nothing to talk about," he said, his voice clipped. "The marriage was a mistake. A strategic miscalculation. I corrected it." "Was it?" Kaylee pressed gently. "Or was it more than that?" She had read Adrienne's journal. She knew the calculated deception, but she also saw the hints of a real relationship that Adrienne had twisted for her own purposes. She saw the shared jokes, the references to trips they had taken. There had been something real there, once. Isael turned from the window, his gray eyes locking with hers. For a moment, she thought she saw a flash of the raw pain he kept so carefully hidden. "She was brilliant," he admitted, his voice low and rough. "Charming, ambitious. She challenged me. In the beginning, I thought I had found my equal. Someone who understood the pressures, the drive. I admired her." "And you loved her," Kaylee finished for him. He didn't deny it. He simply gave a curt, bitter nod. Love is a vulnerability, he stated, the words sounding like a creed he had repeated to himself 1,000 times. An emotional variable that compromises logical decision-making. I allowed that variable into my life. She exploited it. I will not make that mistake again. The finality in his tone was a wall, thick and impenetrable. He was warning her, she realized. He was drawing a line in the sand. Theirs was an alliance, a partnership, but it would never be more. He was telling her not to misinterpret their intellectual intimacy for anything else. The thought sent an unexpected and unwelcome pang through her chest. Everyone gets played, Isael, she said, her voice softer than she intended. Even the best of us. The trick is to learn from it, not to let it turn you into stone. He looked at her, a strange, searching expression on his face. Before he could reply, an alert chimed on Kaylee's terminal. It was a priority notification from one of the deep web trackers she had set on Adrian. She's made a move, Kaylee said, her focus instantly shifting back to the mission. She's just liquidated a significant portion of the assets in her offshore accounts. And she's booked a one-way ticket on a private jet to a non-extradition country. The flight leaves the morning after the summit. Isael was instantly at her side, his personal turmoil forgotten. She's planning her exit, he said, his voice hard. She believes the plan is foolproof. She'll watch the summit from a distance, wait for confirmation that the data has been transferred, and then she'll disappear while Thorne takes the fall. She's getting sloppy, Kaylee murmured, her fingers flying as she traced the digital transactions. She's using a commercial booking agent, not her usual encrypted channels. She's confident. Overconfident. It's the fatal flaw of the narcissist, Isael observed. The belief in one's own infallibility. He looked at the screen, at the flight details, at Adrienne's name. A cold, predatory light entered his eyes. She thinks she's writing the final chapter. It's time we showed her who the real author is. Their plan for the summit was twofold. Phase 1 was the public trap for Thorne. Phase 2, however, was a private matter, a final reckoning with Adrian. While Isael and his team made the final, public preparations for the keynote, Kaylee worked on the second, more personal trap. She delved into the source code of Prometheus, the digital sanctum that Isael had granted her access to. She wasn't looking for vulnerabilities. She was looking for a ghost. She knew from Adrienne's journal that her ex-wife had a deep, almost obsessive fascination with the AI. She saw it not just as a corporate asset, but as the ultimate symbol of Isael's genius, the one thing he had created that she could never truly possess or control. Kaylee suspected that Adrienne's digital fingerprints would be somewhere inside it. And she found them. Buried deep within the AI's core heuristic programming was a hidden subroutine, vanity block of code that served no functional purpose. It was a digital signature, an artist's mark, left by one of the original programmers. Kaylee cross-referenced the coding style, the specific algorithms used, with known samples. They belonged to Dr. Isael, her father. The discovery hit her with the force of a physical blow. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Her father's brilliant, beautiful code was embedded in the heart of the machine that was at the center of this entire war. It was a part of his legacy, living on in the one place she never would have expected to find it. Isael, in his quest to build the perfect AI, had acquired the remnants of her father's work, likely from the corporate vultures who had picked over his bankrupt company years ago. He probably had no idea of its true origin. But as she examined the code more closely, she saw something else. A tiny, almost imperceptible modification. A backdoor. It was a brilliant piece of malicious code, woven so seamlessly into her father's original work that only someone intimately familiar with his style would ever recognize it as foreign. It was Adrienne's work. This was her real plan. The hardware repeater was a backup, a crude tool for Thorne. Her true ace in the hole was this. She hadn't just been a spy. She had been a saboteur of the highest order. She had corrupted her father's legacy. The cold, professional satisfaction of the hunt vanished, replaced by a white-hot, personal rage. This was no longer just about avenging her father's career. It was about reclaiming his art. She now understood Adrienne's endgame. The Trojan horse they had discovered in her journal wasn't just designed to give her control of Prometheus. It was designed to corrupt it from within, to slowly degrade its higher functions, turning the brilliant AI into a powerful but unpredictable weapon. She couldn't possess Isael's creation, so she had decided to poison it, to ensure that if she couldn't have it, no one could. Kaylee began to work, her fingers moving with a speed and fury she had not felt in years. She didn't remove Adrienne's backdoor. That would be too simple, and it would alert Adrienne that she had been discovered. Instead, she decided to turn Adrienne's own weapon against her. She isolated the malicious subroutine, wrapping it in a digital cage of her own design. She then wrote a new piece of code, a logic bomb, and linked it to the backdoor. It was designed to do one thing. The moment Adrienne tried to activate her backdoor using her unique cryptographic key, Kaylee's logic bomb would detonate. It wouldn't just block her access. It would trigger a massive, system-wide data purge of every account, every server, every hidden file linked to that key. It would trace every digital shadow Adrienne had ever cast and erase it from existence. It would wipe out her offshore accounts, corrupt her escape plans, and brick every one of her devices. It would turn the ghost into a digital non-entity. It was the technological equivalent of a public unmasking and execution, and it would be delivered by the very code she had sought to corrupt. The night before the summit, a fragile, unspoken peace settled over the penthouse. The traps were set. The players were all in position. There was nothing left to do but wait for the curtain to rise. Kaylee found Isael on the terrace, a glass balcony that jutted out into the night air, overlooking the glittering expanse of the city. He was leaning against the railing, his tuxedo jacket off, his sleeves rolled up, the wind ruffling his dark hair. For the first time, he looked almost relaxed. She came to stand beside him, the silence between them comfortable, familiar. "It's quiet," she said. "The calm before the storm," he replied. He looked at her, his expression serious. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Kaylee, thank you." "We're not done yet," she cautioned. "I know." He turned to face her fully, his proximity making her heart beat a little faster. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not letting the past turn you to stone." He reached out, his fingers gently tucking a stray strand of her hair behind her ear. The touch was feather-light, but it sent a jolt of electricity through her. "When this is over, I would like to renegotiate the terms of our arrangement." Kaylee's breath caught in her throat. She looked up into his gray eyes and saw not the cold CEO or the ruthless warrior, but a man standing on the edge of a precipice, tentatively reaching for a hand to hold. "What did you have in mind?" she whispered. Before he could answer, his gaze shifted to something behind her. A flicker of movement in the reflection on the glass doors. "Get down," he yelled, shoving her to the side as he lunged in the same direction. The world exploded in a shower of glass. A sniper's bullet, fired from a distant rooftop, shattered the panel where Kaylee had been standing a second before. It ricocheted off the marble floor, embedding itself in the wall. Isael was covering her with his own body, his arms a steel cage around her. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his voice a harsh growl of pure terror. "No," she managed to gasp, her ears ringing from the sound of the shot. "I'm fine." "You?" "Fine." He helped her to her feet, pulling her away from the exposed terrace and into the relative safety of the living room. Security alarms blared through the penthouse. His personal detail burst into the room, weapons drawn. "Lock it down," Isael roared. "Find him." But they both knew it was too late. The shooter was a professional, long gone. It wasn't an assassination attempt. It was a warning. Thorne was getting nervous. Or Adrienne was sending a final, bloody message. Isael's arms were still wrapped around her, holding her tightly against his chest. She could feel the frantic, heavy beat of his heart. The icy control was shattered, replaced by a raw, primal fear. "He tried to kill you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, his breath warm against her hair. In that moment, holding on to him amidst the chaos and the shattered glass, Kaylee understood. His walls hadn't just been cracked, they had been demolished. The sniper's bullet had done what no amount of strategic planning could. It had exposed the truth. This wasn't about a contract anymore. It wasn't about revenge, or a partnership, or an alliance. The ghost of the past had tried to tear them apart, but in doing so, had only succeeded in showing them both what they truly stood to lose. And it was everything. The aftermath of the sniper attack was a controlled storm of activity. Isael's security team, a squad of elite ex-special forces operatives, swarmed the penthouse, their movements economical and deadly serious. They secured the perimeter, analyzed trajectories, and liaised with a discreet, hand-picked team from the San Vesper Police Department. The shattered glass was swept away, the bullet hole in the wall spackled over. Within an hour, the physical evidence of the attack was all but erased, yet its presence lingered in the air, a palpable, vibrating tension. Through it all, Isael did not leave Kaylee's side. The icy composure he wore like a second skin had been shattered, and in its place was a raw, fierce protectiveness that was both terrifying and deeply comforting. He had dismissed all but his most trusted inner circle of guards, his gaze constantly sweeping the room, assessing threats that were no longer there. He held her hand in a grip that was almost painful, as if he feared she might dematerialize if he let go. They sat on one of the stark white sofas, a universe away from where they had been standing on the terrace moments before. The conversation about renegotiating their terms, the tentative step towards something more, had been violently interrupted, yet the unspoken words still hung in the air, now charged with a new, desperate urgency. It was Adrian, Kaylee said, her voice a low, steady anchor in the chaotic currents of the room. It wasn't a guess. Thorn is an arrogant predator, but he's not stupid. A failed assassination attempt on the eve of his greatest triumph would be an unnecessary risk. This was personal. It was a message. A final act of psychological warfare from her to you. Isael's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing along his cheek. She was aiming for you, he stated, his voice a low growl. Not me. She knows. She must have realized you were more than just a decorative wife. She sees you as the threat. She was trying to take my queen off the board before the final move. The use of the word queen was not lost on her. It was a term from their strategic planning, but it felt like more. He saw her not as a pawn, not as an asset, but as the most powerful piece in his arsenal and in his life. She failed, Kaylee said simply, squeezing his hand. And tomorrow, she will pay for it. The attack, intended to terrorize and destabilize them, had the opposite effect. It solidified their resolve, burning away any lingering doubts or hesitations. The last vestiges of their contractual arrangement were incinerated in that single, violent moment. They were no longer just partners in a corporate war. They were two people who had faced death together and had seen, in that terrifying clarity, what was truly at stake. As dawn broke, casting long, dramatic shadows across the city, a fragile calm descended. The security teams had completed their sweep. The penthouse was once again a silent, gleaming fortress. Marcus arrived, his face pale and drawn, carrying 2 encrypted data slates. The summit is proceeding as planned, he announced, his voice strained. The official police report will list the incident as a stray bullet from a gang-related shooting several blocks away. A cover story to prevent public panic. Thorn's people have been calling all morning, feigning concern. He's nervous. He should be, Isael said, his voice devoid of all warmth. He finally released Kaylee's hand and stood, the icy mask of the CEO beginning to reform. But this time, Kaylee could see the fire burning behind it. Kaylee, are the final preparations complete? The trap is set, she confirmed, her own voice cool and professional. Both of them. The public one for Thorn, and the private one for Adrian. They're linked and automated. My work is done. The rest is theater. Then it's time for the final dress rehearsal, Isael declared. He led her not to the command center, but to the media room, a home theater with a wall-sized screen and immersive sound. He dimmed the lights and a single image appeared on the screen, the stage at the Global Tech Summit Auditorium. This is the live security feed, he explained. Thorn believes he is in control. He has a man on the inside of the summit's AV team. At the precise moment I activate Prometheus on stage, his man will engage the hardware repeater you discovered. The data stream will be diverted to their receiver, and from there, to Adrian's location. But they won't be receiving the real Prometheus code, Kaylee said, continuing the narrative. They'll be receiving the Cerberus package, a dummy version of the AI, perfect in every superficial way, but embedded with a suite of my own tracking and surveillance demons. The moment they download it, we will have access to their entire network. We will see everything they see, hear everything they say. And while they are distracted by their supposed victory, Isael continued, his voice taking on a predatory edge, the real show begins. The unmasking protocol. Kaylee nodded. The moment Cerberus is fully downloaded, it will trigger a command to the summit's main presentation server. It will override Thorn's planned victory speech and instead broadcast a new presentation, the one we prepared. On the screen in the media room, Isael initiated a simulation. A slick, corporate video began to play. It started with headlines about Thorn's hostile takeover bid, then transitioned to high-resolution satellite imagery of the apartment building where Adrian lived. It showed bank statements, flight records, a timeline of her deception. And then, the centerpiece, the audio from their meeting at the sanctum. Isael's voice, cold and clear, filled the room. You have a spy in my house. That is unacceptable. Followed by Thorn's reply. She will be dealt with. She has become a liability. Consider her retired. It was a public execution, a symphony of damning evidence, all packaged into a sleek, 5-minute presentation that would play out on a 50-foot screen in front of the most powerful people in the tech world. Thorn will be exposed. Adrian will be implicated. He'll be arrested on stage. The company, the code, everything is protected, Isael concluded. The plan was perfect. But what about Adrian? Kaylee asked. This exposes her, but it doesn't stop her. She'll see this happening, and she'll run. Isael's lips curved into a chilling smile. That, he said, is where your trap comes in. While the world is watching Thorn's downfall, Adrian will be panicking. Her first instinct will be to secure her asset. She will try to activate the true backdoor, the one she planted in your father's code, to gain direct control of the real Prometheus, thinking it's her last chance. She'll use her personal key, her final ace in the hole. And the moment she does, Kaylee whispered, a thrill of cold, clean victory running through her, the logic bomb detonates. It won't just block her, it will obliterate her. Every account, every alias, every digital escape route. By the time the authorities get to her, she'll be a ghost with no money, no identity, and no way out. They watched the simulation play out in silence. It was a masterpiece of strategy and technological warfare. A perfect, inescapable trap. As the lights came up, Isael turned to her. The weight of the impending battle was heavy in the air, but there was also a sense of profound, shared accomplishment. My father had a phrase, Isael said, his voice softer now. He believed that in any great endeavor, you need two things, a sword and a shield. The sword is the one who goes on the attack, the public face of the battle. The shield is the one who works in the shadows, protecting the core, anticipating the enemy's moves. I always thought I had to be both. He looked at her, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. I was wrong. You are the most formidable shield I could ever have imagined. And you're not such a bad sword yourself, she replied, a small smile touching her lips. The compliment, in their shared language of strategy and warfare, was more intimate than any flowery declaration. It was a statement of absolute, mutual respect. It was the foundation of whatever was growing between them. The hours leading up to the summit were a strange mixture of tension and calm. They moved through the final preparations like two dancers who had rehearsed their steps 1,000 times. Kaylee monitored their digital traps, ensuring every line of code was perfect. Isael conferred with Marcus and his security chief, finalizing the legal and physical containment plans. As they prepared to leave for the auditorium, Isael stopped her in the foyer of the penthouse. He was dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, the uniform of the CEO. But as he looked at her, his expression was unguarded. There is one last variable, he said. Us. What about us? She asked, her heart beginning to pound. Last night, on the terrace, before we were so rudely interrupted, I was about to tell you that this arrangement, this contract, is no longer sufficient. It does not cover the reality of our partnership. He took a step closer, his hands finding hers. They were warm and strong. When this is over, Kaylee, the contract is void. But I hope our alliance is not. Isael. She started, unsure of what to say. I am not a man who deals in sentiment, he continued, his voice a low, earnest rumble. I deal in facts. And the fact is, my life is demonstrably, quantifiably better with you in it. The fact is, the thought of losing you last night was unacceptable. The fact is, I have come to rely on your intelligence, your courage, and your presence in a way I have never relied on anyone. He took a deep breath. These are the facts. The conclusion is inescapable. He didn't say the word love. He didn't need to. In his own logical, analytical way, he was laying his heart bare, presenting his feelings as an irrefutable conclusion drawn from the data. Tears pricked at Kaylee's eyes. The conclusion is mutual, she whispered. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. Then we have one last battle to win together. And then, we can discuss the terms of a new contract. One with a lifetime clause. The promise of that future, a future she hadn't dared to even imagine, gave her a strength she didn't know she possessed. She was no longer just Cassandra, the avenging ghost. She was Kaylee Iden, a woman who had found an unexpected partner in the most unlikely of circumstances. As they rode to the summit, the city lights blurring past them, they were silent. But it was no longer a silence of tension or strategy. It was a silence of complete understanding. The stage was set. The masks were in place. The unmasking was about to begin. And for the first time, Kaylee felt no fear, only a profound and certain sense of coming home. The battle for Prometheus was about to end, but the story of Isael and Kaylee was just beginning. Chapter 9. The Prometheus Gambit. The auditorium for the Global Tech Summit was a cathedral of innovation. A vast, tiered space packed with the most influential figures in the technology sector, venture capitalists with the power to fund nations, journalists whose words could make or break a company, and rival CEOs whose polite smiles concealed daggers. The air buzzed with anticipation, a palpable energy that was focused on the sleek, minimalist stage at the center of the room. Tonight, Isael Chosen was set to unveil the future, and the world was watching. Kaylee sat in the front row, a position of honor befitting her role as the supportive, elegant Mrs. Chosen. To the casual observer, she was a picture of serene composure, her hands resting calmly in her lap, her expression one of wifely pride. But beneath the surface, she was a coiled spring of hyper-awareness. A custom-designed smart lens in her right eye fed her a constant, discrete stream of data, network traffic, security camera feeds, and a biometric analysis of key players in the room. In her mind, she was not in an auditorium. She was at the central console of her war room, her senses extended into the digital ether. She saw Julian Thorne, seated 3 rows behind her, flanked by his legal team. He looked triumphant, a Roman emperor about to watch the gladiators enter the Colosseum. He caught her eye for a moment and gave her a condescending, patronizing smile. He saw her as a trophy, a beautiful but irrelevant accessory to the main event. He had no idea he was looking at the architect of his own demise. Across the auditorium, she spotted the man she had identified as Thorne's inside asset on the AV team, a man named Henderson. He was trying to look busy, but his furtive glances toward Thorne and the nervous way he kept touching his earpiece were a dead giveaway. He was in position, ready to divert the data stream. The house lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. A single, dramatic spotlight illuminated the center of the stage. And into that light walked Isael Chosen. He commanded the stage with an effortless authority. He was not just a CEO giving a presentation. He was a visionary sharing his creation. He began to speak, his voice calm and confident, resonating through the auditorium's perfect sound system. He spoke of the future of artificial intelligence, of its potential to solve humanity's greatest challenges, from disease to climate change. He was painting a picture of a better world, all made possible by the technology he was about to reveal. Kaylee watched him, a swell of pride rising in her chest that had nothing to do with their plan. He was brilliant. He was passionate. This was the man behind the icy armor, the inventor who dreamed of changing the world. And she was about to help him save that dream. For years, Project Prometheus has been a closely guarded secret, Isael was saying, his voice building to a crescendo. Tonight, for the first time, we are going to show you not just what it can do, but how it thinks. On the massive screen behind him, a stunningly complex, 3-dimensional neural network materialized, a pulsating web of light and energy. This was the mind of Prometheus. Prometheus, Isael said, his voice dropping to an almost reverential tone, is more than a machine. It is a partner, a collaborator. Tonight, we have given it a single, complex task to analyze all available public data, financial markets, geopolitical events, climate models, social media trends, and to identify the single greatest threat to global stability over the next 5 years. A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. This was unprecedented. A live, real-time demonstration of a true, predictive AI. Kaylee's eyes flickered to her data feed. She saw Henderson, the inside man, give a subtle nod. She saw a new, encrypted data stream open up from the summit's main server, routed towards the proxies she had traced back to Adrian. The hardware repeater was active. Thorne was taking the bait. They were downloading the Cerberus package. On stage, Isael continued. The analysis will take approximately 5 minutes. While Prometheus works, I'd like to talk about the principles that have guided its development: transparency, accountability, and above all, trust. As he spoke, Kaylee initiated her own silent countdown. The Cerberus package was large, a complex dummy file designed to take time to download. This gave them their window. She monitored the download progress: 10%, 25%, 50%. She could feel Thorne's smug satisfaction from across the room. He believed he was winning. He believed he was moments away from possessing the most valuable piece of technology in human history. Meanwhile, in a sterile, white-on-white apartment in the Sovereign Tower, Adrian Vancroft Chosen watched a live stream of the summit on a wall of monitors. A glass of champagne sat untouched on her desk. Her bags were packed, her escape plan in place. She watched Isael on stage, a bitter, triumphant smile on her lips. She saw the data transfer begin, the progress bar slowly filling on her own screen. Everything was going according to plan. Thorne, the fool, was taking all the risk, and she was about to reap all the rewards. Back in the auditorium, Isael was concluding his speech on ethics. For any technology this powerful, the greatest danger is not that it will fail, but that it will be used to deceive. That it will be co-opted by those who seek to manipulate, to control, to profit from a lie. As he said the word, lie, Kaylee saw the download progress on her feed hit 100%. The Cerberus package had been delivered. Showtime. She sent a single, encrypted command from a hidden app on her watch. It was a simple, two-word instruction: execute. Unmask. On stage, the simulation of Prometheus's neural network on the giant screen flickered. For a split second, it went dark. A collective gasp went through the audience. Thorn leaned forward, a frown creasing his brow. Had something gone wrong? Then the screen lit up again. But it wasn't with the results of Prometheus's analysis. It was with the slick, corporate logo of the presentation they had prepared. Headline: The Takeover, a case study in corporate espionage. Thorn froze. His face, which had been a mask of smug triumph, turned ashen. He stared at the screen in disbelief. This wasn't possible. The presentation began. It was a brutal, systematic dismantling of his entire operation. It showed the leaked documents, the timeline of the stock manipulation. It showed the satellite photo of Adrian's apartment building, with the data streamed from the summit pointing to it like a glowing red arrow. And then came the audio. Isael's voice, captured in crystal clarity from their meeting at the sanctum, boomed through the auditorium. You have a spy in my house. That is unacceptable. A wave of shock and confusion swept through the audience. People were turning to look at Thorn, their expressions a mixture of horror and fascination. Thorn's voice replied, amplified for all to hear. She will be dealt with. She has become a liability. Consider her retired. It was a confession. A public, undeniable admission of conspiracy. Thorn looked like he had been turned to stone, his face a grotesque mask of rage and disbelief. His lawyers were whispering frantically in his ear, but he didn't seem to hear them. He was staring at Isael, who stood calmly on the stage, watching the chaos he had unleashed. The presentation ended with a final, damning slide, a copy of the official criminal complaint that Marcus had filed with the SEC and the FBI just moments before, detailing charges of market manipulation, corporate espionage, and conspiracy. The auditorium erupted. Camera flashes strobed like lightning. Journalists were shouting questions. And through the main doors at the back of the hall, a team of grim-faced FBI agents began to make their way down the aisle, their target clear. The first part of the trap had sprung perfectly. In her high-tech apartment, Adrian stared at her monitors, her face a mask of cold fury. The live stream had been replaced by the same damning presentation that was playing in the auditorium. She saw her name, her apartment, her carefully constructed web of deceit laid bare for the world to see. Thorn, the incompetent idiot, had failed. He had walked into a trap. But she was not Thorn. She was smarter, more careful. Her escape plan was still viable. The authorities would be focused on him. She still had time. And she still had her ace in the hole. She had lost the battle for the company, but she could still win the war for the code. While the world was distracted by Thorn's public immolation, she would take what was rightfully hers. Her fingers flew across her keyboard, her expression one of grim determination. She bypassed the Cerberus package, knowing now that it was a decoy. She initiated a direct connection to the Prometheus core, using the hidden backdoor she had so brilliantly woven into the AI's source code years ago. She entered her unique, unbreakable cryptographic key, a string of code based on the happiest day of her life, not with Isael, but the day she had first surpassed him in a complex coding simulation during their early courtship. It was a moment of private triumph she had savored for years. Goodbye, Isael, she whispered, a cruel smile on her lips as she hit the enter key. Prometheus is mine now. She expected to see a command prompt, a gateway into the AI's mind. Instead, her screens all went blood red. A single line of text appeared, written in a simple, elegant font. Logic bomb detonated. Key, Adrian.v.chosen. Counterhack initiated by Cassandra. Adrian's blood ran cold. Cassandra. The ghost of the dark web? It wasn't possible. How? Then, the true horror began. On her main monitor, a new window opened. It was a live feed from her own bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. She watched, helpless, as the balances began to drain, the numbers spiraling down to zero in a matter of seconds. Account liquidated. Another window. Her portfolio of shell corporations. One by one, their digital certificates of ownership were corrupted, their assets transferred to an anonymous escrow account controlled by law enforcement. Assets seized. Another window. The booking for her private jet. The confirmation number dissolved into a string of meaningless characters. Reservation canceled. Her encrypted communication channels, her forged passports, her hidden servers, all of it was being systematically erased. A progress bar appeared on the screen, showing the obliteration of her digital existence. She was being unmade, bite by bite. And then, the final, most personal violation. A new feed appeared, this one from the security cameras inside her own apartment. She saw herself, staring in horror at her screens, her face pale, her composure shattered. Beneath the video feed, a new line of text appeared. It was a message. You corrupted my father's work. You tried to poison his legacy. This is not just business. This is justice. The authorities will be there in 5 minutes. Nowhere to run. Kaylee Iden. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The quiet, unassuming new wife. The whirlwind romance. It had all been a lie. A setup. Isael hadn't found a new lover. He had hired a ghost. A ghost with a personal vendetta. Adrian let out a sound that was half a sob, half a scream of pure rage. She had been so focused on her own game of deception that she had never once considered that she herself was the one being played. She had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and utterly destroyed. The sound of sirens grew louder in the street below. She looked around the sterile white apartment, her beautiful, perfect cage. There was no escape. She had been erased. The ghost was gone. All that was left was a woman in a room, waiting for the door to be kicked in. Back in the pandemonium of the auditorium, Isael stood on the stage, watching as the FBI agents reached a stunned and unresisting Julian Thorne. They cuffed him and began to lead him away, his face a mask of utter ruin. Isael's gaze swept the crowd until he found Kaylee. She was still seated, a small, triumphant smile on her lips. Their eyes met across the chaotic room. No words were needed. They had done it. They had won. He walked off the stage, ignoring the shouts of the reporters, and moved directly to her. He took her hand and pulled her to her feet, leading her through a side exit, away from the madness. In the quiet backstage corridor, with the sounds of the chaos they had created muffled by the thick walls, he pulled her into his arms. He didn't say anything. He just held her, his arms wrapped tightly around her, his face buried in her hair. It wasn't a hug of passion, but of profound, overwhelming relief and gratitude. "It's over," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It's over," she confirmed, her own voice trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. They had faced their ghosts. They had fought their war. And they had emerged from the fire, not unscathed, but together. The Prometheus Gambit had been a success. The trap had been sprung, and the monsters had been caged. And in the quiet aftermath of the battle, they were all that was left. The aftermath of the Prometheus Gambit, as the media quickly dubbed it, was a global spectacle. The arrest of Julian Thorne on the stage of the Global Tech Summit became the defining image of corporate hubris brought to heel. The subsequent revelations about Adrian Vancroft Chosen, the brilliant, vengeful ex-wife, added a layer of Shakespearean tragedy to the scandal. The world was captivated by the story of the Ice King CEO who had been betrayed and who had, with the help of his mysterious new wife, orchestrated a downfall of breathtaking precision. For Isael and Kaylee, however, the public fallout was merely noise. They retreated from the storm, secluding themselves back in the penthouse, which no longer felt like a sterile monument but a sanctuary, a fortress that had withstood a siege. The immediate hours after the summit were a blur of debriefings with Marcus and law enforcement. The evidence they had collected was airtight. Thorne, facing a lifetime in prison, began to cooperate, throwing Adrian under the bus in a desperate attempt to save himself. Adrian, her digital and financial world obliterated by Kaylee's logic bomb, was apprehended at her apartment without a fight, a queen dethroned, left with nothing but her own impotent rage. The war was over. And in the quiet that followed, a new, more complex reality began to set in. 2 days after the summit, they stood in the living room, the city lights twinkling below them, a peaceful tableau that belied the storm they had just navigated. The silence between them was no longer one of strategic tension or unspoken feelings. It was a silence of anticipation, of standing on the precipice of a new, unwritten chapter. Isael broke the silence. He walked to the sleek, minimalist bar and retrieved not a glass of whiskey, but a bottle of vintage champagne and 2 crystal flutes. "I believe a celebration is in order," he said, his voice softer than Kaylee had ever heard it. He worked the cork free with a muted pop and poured the bubbling liquid. He handed a glass to her, his fingers brushing against hers. The simple touch sent a jolt of warmth through her. To a successful partnership, he toasted, his gray eyes locking with hers. There was no ice in them now, only a deep, profound warmth. To victory, she replied, her voice a little shaky. They clinked their glasses together, the delicate crystal chime echoing in the quiet room. She took a sip of the champagne. It was crisp and exquisite. What happens now? She asked, the question hanging in the air. The contract was fulfilled. Her revenge was complete. Thorn was ruined. By the terms of their agreement, she was free to go. The thought, which should have been liberating, instead felt like a lead weight in her stomach. Isael set his glass down on the marble countertop. He walked over to a drawer in a sleek, built-in credenza and retrieved a familiar, leather-bound document. It was their contract. He held it in his hands for a moment, then walked over to the fireplace, a modern, gas-fueled installation that was more of an aesthetic feature than a source of heat. With a flick of a remote, a line of blue flame danced to life. This is what happens now, he said. He looked at her, his expression serious. Then, with a deliberate, symbolic gesture, he dropped the contract into the flames. They watched in silence as the pages curled, blackened, and turned to ash. The legal document that had bound them together, the foundation of their entire relationship, was gone. The clauses, the conditions, the escape hatches, all of it, dust. The contract is void, he said, turning back to her. Your obligation is met. The compensation stipulated, a sum you repeatedly stated you did not want, has been transferred to a charitable foundation established in your father's name, dedicated to supporting young, independent programmers. Tears sprang to Kaylee's eyes. It was a gesture of such profound understanding, of such deep respect for who she was and what drove her, that it took her breath away. He hadn't just paid her, he had honored her father's memory in a way she never could have on her own. Isael, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The business arrangement is concluded. Kaylee, he continued, taking a step closer. Which leaves us with a different kind of negotiation. He took her free hand in his touch gentle but firm. I find myself in a new position. I am a man who has, against all his better judgment and past experience, fallen in love. I have fallen in love with my brilliant, courageous, and terrifyingly competent partner, and I find I am unwilling to let her go. His confession, so direct and honest, stripped away her last defenses. The tears she had been holding back finally fell, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. I am proposing a new contract, he said, his voice a low, earnest rumble. A permanent one. No clauses for corporate espionage. No penalties for betrayal, because the very concept is now unthinkable. The only term is a lifetime of mutual support, respect, and this. He leaned in and kissed her. It was nothing like their previous, tentative encounters. This was a kiss of profound, unrestrained emotion. It was filled with the relief of a battle won, the gratitude of a life saved, and the deep, soul-shattering joy of finding a true equal. It was a kiss that sealed the end of one story and the beginning of another. Kaylee melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, her champagne flute falling forgotten to the thick rug below. She kissed him back with all the pent-up emotion she had kept locked away, all the admiration, respect, and love she had developed for this complex, brilliant man. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, resting their foreheads against each other. I love you, she whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and wonderfully, liberatingly true. I think I have for a while. I think, he replied, a rare, genuine smile lighting up his face, making him look years younger. I have been falling for you since the moment you walked into that conference room and had the audacity to tell me my own contract was insufficient. She laughed through her tears, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. So what are the terms of this new contract? She asked, her voice playful. Unconditional and perpetual, he murmured, his lips brushing against hers again. With an option for immediate and lifelong renewal. I accept your terms, she said, and sealed the new contract with another kiss. The days that followed were a revelation. They began the process of truly getting to know each other, not as strategic allies, but as partners in life. They explored the vast penthouse, and Kaylee began to slowly but surely inject her own personality into the sterile space. Books appeared on shelves, a comfortable, worn armchair was delivered to the living room, and a framed photograph of her father found a place of honor on the mantel, next to a new photo of the two of them, taken at the gala. A candid shot where they were looking at each other, not the camera, a secret, shared understanding in their eyes. Isael, in turn, began to shed the last remnants of his icy armor. He would leave his work at the office, his evenings dedicated to her. He taught her how to play chess, and was both frustrated and delighted when she, with her hacker's mind for predictive patterns, began to beat him regularly. She discovered he had a dry, wicked sense of humor and a surprising passion for old, black and white films. He, in turn, learned about her life before Cassandra. He learned about her love for hiking in the rain, her encyclopedic knowledge of obscure sci-fi novels, and her secret talent for baking incredible, decadent cakes, a skill she had learned to de-stress from her intense nocturnal activities. The sterile kitchen in the penthouse was soon filled with the warm, comforting smells of chocolate and vanilla, a scent that, for Isael, became synonymous with home. One evening, as they were curled up on the new, comfortable armchair, watching an old Hitchcock movie, Kaylee's curiosity finally got the better of her. "Prometheus," she said softly. "The code my father wrote. Did you know it was his?" Isael paused the movie and turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I didn't, not at first," he admitted. "I acquired the algorithm from a defunct tech firm's patent portfolio about 5 years ago. I only knew it was the most elegant piece of heuristic programming I had ever seen. It was foundational. It became the heart of Prometheus." He reached out and cupped her cheek. "After our first real conversation, when you told me about your father, I suspected. I ran a deep dive analysis and confirmed it. His digital signature is unmistakable. It's a work of genius, just like his daughter. It's the only part of him I have left," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "No," Isael said gently. "You have his legacy. And now, that legacy will be protected. It will change the world, Kaylee, just as he always wanted. And you and I will guide it together." The conversation was a final closing of a circle. Her father's work, stolen and corrupted by their enemies, had, through a strange twist of fate, brought her to the one man who could not only appreciate its genius but could help her protect it. Her quest for revenge had led her, unexpectedly, to a place of healing and love. A few weeks later, Isael called her into his office. The room was no longer just his sanctuary, it had become their shared space. A second, identical terminal now sat next to his. "I have a proposition for you," he said, his tone formal, but his eyes sparkling with amusement. "Another contract?" she teased. "An offer of employment," he corrected. He slid a data slate across the desk to her. It was an official offer from the board of directors of Chosen Dynamics. Position: Chief Technology Officer and Head of Prometheus Division. Kaylee stared at the offer, stunned. It wasn't just a title. It was a position of immense power and trust, second only to his own. It was a public declaration of her role not just as his wife, but as his equal partner in the company. The board was hesitant at first, Isael said with a wry smile. "But I can be very persuasive. I merely presented them with the facts. I pointed out that the company's most significant security breach was solved not by our multi-million-dollar security department, but by you. I pointed out that our greatest strategic victory was engineered not in the boardroom, but in our living room. And I pointed out that there is no one on this planet I trust more to be the guardian of our most valuable asset." "Isael, I don't know what to say," she stammered, overwhelmed. "Say yes," he said simply. "Help me build the future, Kaylee. Not as a ghost in the machine, but here, in the light, by my side." She looked from the offer on the slate to the man standing before her, his heart open, his trust absolute. He was offering her everything she had ever dreamed of, a chance to honor her father's legacy, a challenge worthy of her skills, and a life with a man she loved beyond all measure. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Of course, yes." Their new contract, their true contract, was sealed. Not with a signature on a page, but with a shared vision for the future. The reckoning was complete, the ghosts of the past had been laid to rest, and in their place, a new and powerful alliance was forged, ready to face whatever came next, together. The story wasn't over. In fact, it felt as if it had just truly begun. 1 year later, the penthouse at the apex of the Chosen Dynamics Tower was a place transformed. The sterile, minimalist expanse that had once been a monument to Isael's solitude had been softened and warmed by Kaylee's presence. A sprawling, comfortable sofa had replaced the stark leather couch. Shelves that were once empty now held a mix of her beloved sci-fi novels and his weighty business biographies. The air, once chilled and silent, was now often filled with the sound of laughter, the murmur of quiet conversation, and the intricate melodies of the classical music Isael had discovered he enjoyed. The most significant change, however, was in the office. What was once Isael's solitary command center was now a true partnership. Two identical desks faced each other, a testament to their collaborative leadership. On the wall behind them, where a single, abstract painting had once hung, there was now a large, framed photograph. It had been taken on their wedding day, their real wedding day. 3 months after the downfall of Thorne and Adrian, Isael had insisted on it. It was a small, private ceremony held on the terrace that had once been a scene of violence. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city as they exchanged vows they had written themselves. There were no lawyers, no contracts, only Marcus Vance, who had become a trusted friend, and Kaylee's small circle of hacker friends from her Cassandra days, who had been flown in from around the world. Their identities still shrouded in a respectable level of mystery. It was a joining of their two worlds, a celebration of the truth of who they were. The photograph had captured a moment just after the ceremony, Isael looking at Kaylee with an expression of such profound, unguarded love that it still made her heart ache to see it. As Chief Technology Officer, Kaylee had thrived. She had rebuilt the company's cybersecurity from the ground up, creating a digital fortress that was the envy of the industry. But her true passion was the Prometheus division. Working alongside Isael, she guided the AI's development, ensuring that the ethical principles they had espoused on stage at the summit were woven into its very core. Prometheus was not just a tool for profit. It was becoming a force for good, its vast intelligence now being used to model sustainable environmental solutions and to accelerate research into rare genetic diseases. Her father's legacy was not just protected, it was flourishing in ways he could only have dreamed of. This particular afternoon, Kaylee was at her desk, reviewing a proposal for a new philanthropic initiative when Isael entered the office. He was no longer the man of unyielding ice she had first met. The severe suits had often been replaced by more relaxed attire when they were working alone, cashmere sweaters and tailored trousers. The guardedness in his eyes had been replaced by a deep, settled contentment. Love had not made him weak, as he had once feared, it had made him whole. "I have some news," he said, his voice holding a note of suppressed excitement. He held a data slate in his hand. "Good news, I hope," she asked, leaning back in her chair and giving him a warm smile. Did Prometheus finally solve the problem of mismatched socks? He chuckled, a rich, easy sound that was now one of her favorite things in the world. "Not yet, but it's working on it. This is about one of our other projects." He handed her the slate. On the screen was a single, grainy, black and white image. It was an ultrasound. A tiny, flickering shape, no bigger than a grain of rice, was visible in the center. Below it, the text read, "Gestational age, 8 weeks. Strong fetal heartbeat." Kaylee stared at the image, her breath catching in her throat. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach. She had been feeling a little tired, a little off, for the past couple of weeks, but she had attributed it to their demanding schedules. She looked up at Isael, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a dawning, radiant joy. "My doctor just sent this," he explained, his own voice thick with emotion. "From the physical I had last week. Apparently, my blood work showed some unexpected hormonal markers." She suggested a follow-up. And this was the result. Kaylee stared at him, confused. "Your physical?" "Isael, what are you talking about?" He knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. His gray eyes, usually so analytical, were shimmering with unshed tears. "Kaylee," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Before I met you, after Adrian, I made a decision. I decided that the chosen line would end with me. I didn't want to bring a child into a world I viewed through such a cynical lens. I underwent a procedure, a vasectomy. It was supposed to be permanent." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place for Kaylee with a stunning, heart-stopping clarity. "Supposed to be," she whispered. "Procedures can fail. Or perhaps the universe has a strange, ironic sense of humor," he said, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. He placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. "What I'm trying to say is that I believed I couldn't have children. I entered into our original contract knowing that the clause about an heir was one I could never fulfill. It was another layer of my armor, a final, secret defense against any kind of real, lasting personal connection. But then..." She looked from his face to the ultrasound image on the slate. "Then I met you," he said, his voice thick with wonder. "And you systematically dismantled every defense I had ever built. You taught me to trust again, to hope again, to love again. And it seems that in healing my heart, you somehow healed my future, too. The doctors are calling it a 1 in a million statistical anomaly. A spontaneous reversal. I call it a miracle. I call it you." Kaylee let out a sound that was half a laugh, half a sob. She threw her arms around his neck, pulling him close. All the pieces of their story, all the strange, improbable twists of fate, had led them to this impossible, beautiful moment. Their love had not just built a future, it had literally created one. "We're having a baby," she whispered into his shoulder, the reality of it finally sinking in. "We're having a baby," he confirmed, his arms wrapped tightly around her, his own tears of joy now flowing freely. They stayed like that for a long time, kneeling on the floor of their office, holding each other, lost in the wonder of their own private miracle. The city could glitter and churn outside, the stock market could rise and fall, but in that moment, their entire universe had contracted to the space they occupied, to the tiny, flickering life that was a testament to their love. Later that evening, they sat on the terrace, the space no longer a reminder of violence, but of their vows and their future. The night was clear, the sky a canopy of stars. Kaylee was curled up against Isael, his arm wrapped protectively around her, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "I was thinking about our first contract," she said softly, her head resting on his shoulder. "All those clauses. All those conditions. A business transaction," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "It's funny," she mused. "We signed a contract to create a fake family, to produce a transactional heir, and in the end, we found the real thing in the most unexpected way possible." "There's nothing transactional about this," he said, his hand moving in a slow, soothing circle on her stomach. "This is the furthest thing from a business arrangement. This is the ultimate, illogical, beautiful variable." She thought back to her quest for revenge, the cold, hard anger that had driven her for so long. She had wanted to destroy Julian Thorne, to avenge her father. And she had. But along the way, she had found something so much more valuable than vengeance. She had found forgiveness for Thorne, for Adrian, and for herself. She had found a purpose for her father's legacy. And she had found a love that defied all logic and expectation. "Do you know what the new Prometheus initiative is called?" Isael asked, his voice pulling her from her reverie. "No, you said it was a surprise." "It's the Eris Iden Foundation," he said softly. "Its first project, funded by the profits from the consumer electronics division I almost sold to Thorne, will be to build a state-of-the-art school for gifted, underprivileged students, focusing on computer science and ethical AI development." Kaylee looked up at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. He had taken the last vestiges of their war and transformed them into a monument of hope, a lasting tribute to the father she had adored. "You are a good man, Isael Chosen," she whispered. "I am a better man because of you, Kaylee Iden Chosen," he replied, his voice filled with a love that was as vast and as brilliant as the city skyline before them. He leaned in to kiss her, a slow, sweet promise of all the years to come. As their lips met, she felt a tiny, almost imperceptible flutter deep within her. It was the first hint of the new life they had created, a secret greeting from their own small ghost in the machine. Their story had begun with a contract designed to shield a broken heart and facilitate a quest for revenge. It was a document of clauses and conditions, of suspicion and self-interest. But love, in its stubborn, miraculous way, had refused to be bound by those terms. It had rewritten the entire agreement, transforming a business arrangement into a lifelong partnership, a quest for vengeance into a journey of healing, and a sterile penthouse into a home. Their new contract, the one that truly mattered, was unwritten. It was in the shared smiles, the comfortable silences, the unwavering trust. It was in the legacy of a brilliant father being used to build a better future. And it was in the steady, hopeful beat of a tiny, new heart, a heart that was the ultimate, irrefutable proof that the most powerful force in the world was not logic, or money, or power, but a love that was brave enough to take the ultimate, calculated risk.